Okay, let's go ahead and get started since we're actually a little later, but that's cool.
We probably got wiggle.
We've got some wiggle room. So just if you've got your agenda, we're going to start with introductions. I did want to make sure that people were aware of the fact that you need to have your mic on if you're going to talk, since we need to make sure that this is all on the record. So I'll go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome to the USEAP summer meeting. If that's not why you came, now might be a good time to leave. You're welcome to stay, obviously. My name is Maggie Crockett. I am a special education faculty up at the University of Utah. I'm also the chair this year. Yay! I think we'll just keep going around the circle and introduce everyone, and then we'll open it up to public comment.
My name is Janelle Locke. I'm representing parents of students with disability. I'm from Tooele, and I have a 13-year-old with autism.
I'm Amy Langoni with the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation. I am the Transition and Supported Employment Coordinator.
I'm Jan Watson, and I'm from Price, and I have a 16-year-old daughter who is autistic and a 19-year-old daughter with dyslexia.
John Copenhaver. I'm from TACE and Utah State University, and I'll be doing a training today.
I'm Jennifer Howell, new to the group as a parent of student with disabilities. My 15-year-old daughter, Nicole, has bipolar disorder. I'm happy to be here.
I'm Terrell Young, and I have a son with autism, and I am also the special ed director at Ogden Preparatory Academy. No, I don't know.
Okay. I'm Amy Wyrick. I have a son with in high school in Salt Lake District, and so I'm representing him and myself. That's it.
I am Mallory Poole. I represent teachers of students with disabilities. I currently teach special education at Spectrum Academy in Pleasant Grove.
I'm Kathy Chisholm. I am the special education director for Davis School District.
No, it needs to have the red light. Yeah, we've got another.
Is it on now? Okay. I'm Julia Head. I'm the director at the Pingree Center, and I believe I'm representing private schools here. So,
I'm Charity Diven. I have a son with a head injury, and I have another son with a learning disability and a daughter who is deaf.
My name is Liz Banner, and I represent my son. He has autism, and he is 15 years old.
My name is Christina Guevara, and I'm the secondary school principal of Spectrum Academy in North Salt Lake, and I'm an LEA official.
Catherine McKenzie. I have a couple children with dyslexia and other learning disabilities.
Eliza.
Good morning. I'm Glenna Gallo. I'm the State Director of Special Ed at the Utah State Board of Education. So just in case you're not aware, the State Office of Education, as of tomorrow, will no longer exist. And we've been renamed the State Board of Education.
And I'm Rebecca Donovan. I'm Glenna's secretary, and I'm your secretary.
My name is Laura Lee Gillespie. I'm an attorney at the Disability Law Center with a focus in special education.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome to everyone. I would like to open it up to public comment, as this is a public meeting, so if we have any public comment. Oh, all right.
So I'm going to announce something that is going to be very impactful to this committee. But Rebecca Donovan, who has served special ed for the past 30 years, has decided to retire and will be retiring sometime in September. So this will probably be her last meeting, and so I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of that. And I am telling you because I'm not sure that Rebecca can do so without.
I'm too misty, guys. That's my thing.
So.
I'm a sympathetic crier, so it would just be bad all around. Well, yes.
I didn't think it's appropriate to mention that Rebecca Turley, who has been part of this group, I think she was still going, or her term was still, she's been diagnosed with cancer and it's terminal. So I just wanted to let everybody know. I know she would want you all to know because she served for a very long time on this committee. And so she's home now with hospice, and just keep her in your thoughts and her family in your thoughts, please. So.
Absolutely. All right. In your packets, there is a list of the USEAP priorities that we have had, or the things that we have addressed over the last 5 years. And I just wanted to get you thinking about some of the priority topics that we might want to provide input on or investigate further for this coming year. We're going to do that later on this afternoon, but just to get you starting to think about the things that perhaps we want to talk about. I know that one of the ones that we didn't really finish up, I think, as much as we wanted to last year was this idea of effective instruction. In particular, I think there was some question about whether we wanted to focus that more on collaboration between general education and special education. So that's just sort of putting a bug in your ear of the possible things that we could consider when we start talking about what we want to set as our priorities for the coming year. Is there anything else you wanted me to talk about with that, Glenna? Okay. Excellent. Well, without further ado, and much further ahead of schedule than we planned, yield the floor to John. If you're ready. Sorry, I know we've got you about 20 minutes early.
So do you mind if I just talk briefly while you get ready? You can stand up and get ready. It's going to be very brief. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware that this committee is federally required. It's part of IDEA. The actual workings of the committee, though, is up to the state. And so we have existing bylaws that are in place regarding our committee. The State Board of Education is reviewing all of their public input committees at this time. And so I have provided them with a copy of the IDEA requirements, the state rule requirements, and then the bylaw requirements. Because we're going through and revising the state rules at this time, and you guys have provided input on that, they also wanted to look at the makeup and the rules regarding this committee. So they are reviewing our bylaws and may be requesting some changes to those bylaws. The conversation was, would this committee continue to advise me, and then I would advise the state board? Or would this committee advise the state board directly? There was a lot of discussion in the subgroup that I was talking to about that. I believe where they're going to go is the way that we have it now, where you advise me and I advise them. The reason that I think they're going to maintain that is that there are only 2 directors here at the state that are appointed by the board, and that their job responsibilities are in statute. One of them is mine, a state director. I'm actually appointed by the board. And one is the director of school land trust. And so it looks like at this time they're going to request that we maintain the way that we've been doing it. But I want to let you know, depending on what decision they make, those bylaws may change. And again, because we're under the direction of the board, it would change through a process other than this committee requesting the changes. So I just wanted to make sure, John, that was new information, that you had that before we moved forward.
We actually did not set one, which is something we're going to need to do.
don't know me, I'm at the Center for Technical Assistance for Excellence in Special Education. We're located at Utah State University. And we have a number of projects at TACE that we work collaboratively with Glenna and her staff. And I'll go through a few of those a little bit later. My background has been a school district director, school psychologist. I've been a resource teacher, special ed teacher. I've done a lot of work in Indian education. I think I've been at all 187 BIE schools across the country, and that's one of my passions. The two things that I enjoy most, I came to Utah State University about 25 years ago, and was coming down to Utah State so my wife could finish up her elementary education degree, which we did, and we were going to do that and be gone in a year, but I'm still there. And so this part of my career, my journey in education has been, thank you very much, has been providing technical assistance to state education agencies across the country. And again, I think I've been in every state across the country. Two of my real priorities, I guess, is working with state special ed directors, number one and foremost. I have such a great deal of respect for the Office of the State Director of Special Education. And you have, and I know Glenna doesn't think I mean this, but you truly have the best state director in the country. And I've been around, so I know that she is such a quality person. She's so intelligent, and she really keeps the main thing, and that is children and youth with disabilities. She's so highly regarded outside the state of Utah. And she is the incoming president of the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, which is a great honor. So she is representing all other state directors as of September at their national conference. She will be inducted as the president. So congratulations, Glenna. And the other person I want to acknowledge, of course, is Rebecca, and she's been here for 30 years, and Rebecca and I have been on kind of a journey together over these many years, and I think I go back as far as Steve Kukik, and I think before Steve it was Woody Pace, and I think from that point on, Utah's only had 5 or 6 state directors in the entire history, which is that is really unusual for a state. I know states that turn over about yearly on their state director. And so just as you're gaining momentum, the state director leaves and you go back to square one again. So you have a good, you've always had a good state director here in the state of Utah. And of course, Glenna, but Rebecca and I have known, and we've been on this journey, and I think we owe her a round of applause for the great work that she's done. I just can't imagine this group and coming here each year without. Now you will be an alumni of this panel, so you're invited back for lunch every year. So we want to see you, Rebecca. Again, the other group that I really put a lot of time with is special education advisory panels. So between the State Director of Special Education and the State Advisory Panel, those are the two entities in a state that can really create positive change for children and youth with disabilities. So you should really feel proud that you're sitting on this panel, because you are representing the entire stakeholders in special education across the state. So, you're just not sitting here representing yourself, but you're representing that broader group of stakeholders that you happen to represent. So that's a great honor. You need to put that on your resume, that you actually have been on this group, because again, there's a lot of other people that could be sitting where you are. And in my experience, the panels have done more to change special education than any other group in a state. And the Office of Special Education Programs in Washington, D.C. places a lot of importance on this group and often asks the state special education director to get input in regards to a particular issue. So anyway, today you have a packet. Let's run through that really quickly, and then we'll get right into it. On the left side, just an agenda of items that I'll cover. And feel free to ask questions, offer comments. In my presentation, I will be talking about the legal requirements under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act as it relates to panels. But I'll also talk about some best practices, how other states, and as Glenna has indicated, every state is a little bit different. There's certain requirements that you have to adhere to, but then every state's panel is based on the unique climate and culture of that state. And so, and I think that's really good. So every panel that I attend is a little bit different. You also have at my PowerPoint, there are some slides that I didn't include, but you have on my PowerPoint, but all of the important slides are there for you. On the other side, the right side of the packet, you have and I give you this every year, these are the 17 indicators in Part B of the State Performance Plan Annual Performance Report. And Glenna will be talking a lot about these indicators over the course of the year. On the other side are the Part C indicators, and those are for the lead or the Interagency Coordinating Council Lead Agency Part C program, which is at the Department of Health, and they have 11 indicators. And so it's just important. It's I would keep this with you as you attend these meetings, because these are, again, this will be a focus of your discussions. I included bylaws, and I know Rebecca gives you your bylaws, and so it sounds like there might be some changes to these bylaws, and if there are changes, Glenna will bring those to your attention. A little one-pager on acronyms that I'll be using in this presentation, and I'll try to steer clear of acronyms, but if I happen to slip, they're right there. There's a one-pager on the functions, your functions under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and also the membership requirements. And these kind of mimic your bylaws. Just a handout on Robert's Rules of Order. This is more for Maggie. And so she, if she needs to invoke Robert's Rules of Order, she'll do that. Normally that'll be when you have to take a vote on any particular issue or item. And then the last item is just the primer for special ed advisory panels. We update this every year, and this booklet has everything in it that you need to know to be an effective panel member. So everything that I talk about today will be in that booklet. So those are your materials, and hopefully they will help you and guide you. How many are brand new to the panel? Oh, quite a few. Great. What I did on this presentation is I've kind of infused your bylaws in the various parts of my presentation. So when I cover a particular issue in regards to the panels, then we'll probably pull up that part of your bylaws just so you're familiar with your own bylaws. If you read nothing else, read your bylaws, because those are the day-to-day operating procedures of your panel. So you need to be really familiar with your bylaws. Again, really quickly, just a little bit more about TACE. We have a lot of different projects and centers across the country. We work in about 22 or 23 different states, from Georgia to Alaska, and Utah is involved with a number of these projects. We host the Utah Professional Development Network, and so Dave Forbush and his staff, Task 12, Utah belongs to that. That's 14 different states, and we come in annually to assess the skills of your school-based sign language interpreters. And then, there is training available, online training, if they need to enhance those skills. Dispute resolution in special education, Utah belongs to that. That's 13 states, and we have quarterly conference calls for the state mediators, complaint investigators, due process hearing officers, and SEA staff. So, our job is to keep them updated in regards to all the changes, the legal issues. We assist Galena with the Utah Law Conference, which is coming up here on the 1st of August. Those are just a few things. We're involved with a number of other things, but those are kind of the major things that we're involved with here in Utah. Again, our goal is keeping the main thing, and TACE, we originally started as the Mountain Plains Regional Resource Center way back in 1980. That was before I arrived here, but Dr. Glenn Latham, who was a international expert on parent issues and behavior management, he founded the program. Glenn passed away in 2001. I became the director about 1999, but it's always been about the kids, and everything that we do has to in some way relate back to children and youth with disabilities. Again, our purpose here, just a general orientation of your purpose, membership functions, bylaws, meeting requirements, etc. The important thing here is making sure that you're all on the same page as you move forward in your meetings this year. And so you new members, this will bring you up to speed on, the knowledge base, I guess, on what this is all about. And I often get panel members say, John, it really took me 2 to 3 years to get my kind of grounded and really understanding what we do here and how we can be really effective. So, it's a process, and it all works out. You have great leadership here, and Maggie is going to be a great chair as you move forward. Again, congratulations. Take your role seriously. Try to attend all meetings. Remember, when you're not here, your whole stakeholder group is not here. So you need to take that seriously. I know the meetings are announced a year in advance, so you should get those on your calendar. So, and again, your voice is very important. And if you haven't read this little booklet, The Man Who Planted Trees, it's one of my favorites, but it's how one person can truly make a difference. So you individually can make a huge difference for this panel and children and youth with disabilities in the state of Utah. So this is a great little read, and it's just about a man that moves into a real barren area in France, and he decides over the period of his lifetime that he's going to make this area a beautiful place. And so he buys a sack of acorns when he's able to, and he plants those, knowing that those acorns, maybe 50% might germinate. And so over a period of 60 or 70 years of his life, he transforms this area into a beautiful, lush area of France. And so it's just a lesson for us that, oh, bless you, Jennifer. I hope you're not allergic to me. Okay. It just goes to show you that with time and one person, we can really make a difference. I think sometimes in our country we're a little impatient with change. And my best friend growing up was from Japan, and very traditional Japanese family. And I remember sitting with his family and his dad telling me, John, you're much too impatient. Good change takes time, and in our culture, change is a 300-year process. And so sometimes I think we're a little anxious for things to change. Another great little book is called Seed Folks, and it's just about a story of a young girl in an inner city that sees potentially a little garden spot in this inner city environment. She goes out and cultivates this bit of land, and she plants a few seeds, and people are looking down from their apartments, and they ultimately come down and they do a little bit of the garden, they plant seeds, and before long the whole community's involved, and they come down and they meet each other. And it's just, again, a story about how one person can bring people together on a common cause for the good. And I did bring a copy of this for Maggie since she deserves it. You bet. And then again, Margaret Mead and this statement about a small group of committed citizens can make a huge difference. And really, when you think of change in our society, it's always a small group of committed citizens, and that's what you are. And you can truly make a huge change for children and youth with disabilities in the state of Utah. Again, terminology. These four terms, as I get around. Some states call this a board, others a committee, a council. Utah has decided to adhere to the IDA terminology, which I think is great. This is right out of your bylaws. The name of the panel shall be the Utah Special Ed Advisory Panel, USEAP. So that is the correct terminology as far as the Utah panel. Yeah. Oh, great. Well, yeah, and I did put a copy in their packets. Yeah, they have a copy. So, okay, so we'll. Just for your information, this is a national website for panel members, and I happen to be on this planning committee for the Office of Special Ed Programs. But we've put together a website. Anybody can go into this website, click on Utah. It'll go right to your the part of your website that deal with your advisory panel. So if you want to know what Nevada's doing or New Hampshire, you can do that. By the way, I went into your website last week, and it's very well done, and Rebecca does a really good job in keeping that current and up to date. Also, there's usually an announcement on that website about a webinar for panel members, and it's also intended for the Interagency Coordinating Council under Part C, the birth to 2-year-olds. But there's normally there is a webinar quarterly. I think the next one is August or September. And it'll be around how to represent your stakeholder group. And so normally a member of the Office of Special Ed Programs will come on, and they'll do kind of a short presentation, and then they'll ask a number of states to report on how they're doing whatever the topic is. And I know Glenna has been on, she's represented Utah on at least one of those that I remember. So anyway, not required, but if you have the time and interest, it's always interesting to see what other states are doing, I guess. So again, just a little overview. These are the federal regulations that pertain to panels. And CFR is the Code of Federal Regulations, and then we have the citation or the the number of the regulations. So there's a regulation on establishment, membership, duties, functions, due process issues, and what they call waiver. We'll talk about all of these. Just acronyms. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these, but as you know, in special education, we have a unique language. And every year, I've just put in bold some of the ones that have been added the last few years. So it's keeping up with these acronyms and understanding them. The IDA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that is the federal law on special ed. SEAP is what you're all about, Special Ed Advisory Panel. And you're all about IDA, the federal law, and within that law is Part B. Now, Part B is around school-age children. So you represent that group of the law. In addition to that, you represent Section 619, which is the preschool population. So it's the 3 to 5-year-olds. So you're all about 3 through 21-year-olds in the state of Utah. Okay? And then that ICC, or the Interagency Coordinating Council in the Department of Health, is advising on the birth through 2-year-olds, or to 2-year-olds. Does that make sense? So ICC, yes, Karen. Yeah. Yeah, in the federal law, under the IDA requirement of membership, it's 226. And the reason for that is there's a couple of reasons. Number one, there's a couple of states in the country that go to 26. And the second is there's a greater emphasis now on post-secondary, children that are in that post-secondary level. When you look at the purpose of IDA, one of the purposes of IDA is to prepare students for post-secondary education and careers in college. And so the law really, even though legally, unless your state specifies, federally, it just talks about that as something that we need to work towards as far as goals. So the other reason that's in there is they wanted to put a cap at 26 because a lot of parents in some panels across the country have been on panels for a number of years, and their children might be 45 or even older. And so to make sure that parents on panels are in that age level so that they've been to IEP meetings, they're kind of used to the current reality of special education. But that's a great question. SSIP, State Systemic Improvement Plan. Glenn is going to talk about your SSIP and your state identified measurable result. That's part of your annual or your state performance plan, annual performance report. That's indicator 17. Part C, again, is that part of IDA that deals with the birth to 2-year-olds. ICC, Interagency Coordinating Council, under Part C. State Education Agency is Glenna and her staff. LEA is Local Education Agency. Kathy and others represent the LEAs. OSEP is that federal oversight agency, Office of Special Ed Programs. Results-driven accountability is the shift that special ed is taking from a focus on just compliance to a focus on results. RTI, responsiveness intervention, multi-tier system of support in Utah, it's MTSS. And that's a general ed responsibility. So those are a few. Section 618 is that part of IDA that deals with all the data requirements. And so, again, Glenna and her staff have a huge responsibility on collecting data and reporting that data to the Office of Special Ed Programs. State performance plan, and then the annual review of the state performance plan is the annual performance report, and that is due in February of each year. So the U.S. Office of Education Special Ed Services submits that report, and based on that report, they're put in one of 4 levels of determination. And I think Glenn will talk about that today. Lead agency, that's under Part C, Department of Health. That's synonymous to the State Education Agency under Part B. Americans with Disabilities Act, Elementary Secondary Education Act, which is really the foundation of all other education laws. That was passed back in 1965, and that is Title I, more general education. The most recent reauthorization of that is the Every Student Succeeds Act. So remember, No Child Left Behind. Now we have Every Child Succeeds Act. The IFSP, Individual Family Service Plan, that's normally under Part C, but the IFSP would be relevant too for the 3 to 5-year-olds. IEP is the accountability tool for children, individual education plan. They need to be educated to the maximum degree in the least restrictive environment. And FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. That is all about confidentiality. And FERPA applies to you as a panel. So, you know, when you're talking, you would never use the name of a student or a staff member in a public setting like this. So you need to be mindful of that. Section 504 is civil rights based on disability, and the Office of Civil Rights is the agency that oversees civil rights in our country. So I just think it's important that we go through those and that you have some understanding of the various acronyms. Again, differences, I've mentioned this, there's no right or wrong way except for those requirements that we'll talk about in federal and state regulations. The panels have been in existence since special ed started back in 1975, and we received a federal law, so these panels have always been there. And they've really been the catalyst for change in states since 1975. And so, you know, will they go away when we get another reauthorization? No. In fact, I think your responsibilities will probably be enhanced with the new reauthorization. This is big picture where you fit, starting with the U.S. Department of Education. And within the U.S. Department of Education, we have a huge office. It's the Office of Special Ed and Rehab Services, OSERS. And within that department, we have the Office of Special Ed Programs, OSEP. That's the office that Glenna and her staff report to and communicate with. And they have a number of technical assistance projects that can help states. If you go off to the left, we have the State Education Agency, so that's here in Utah, Glenna being the director. And then below that is you, the State Special Ed Advisory Panel. So you advise and provide recommendations to your state director of special education. And you do that under Part B of IDA. And Part B would be the 3 to or through 21 years old. And then if you go to the right, it's the Part C part of the law, and the Interagency Coordinating Council, and they advised the lead agency, the Department of Health. Okay? And it's all about improving programs and services for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. So that's where you fit big picture within the federal structure. And again, these are just all of the reauthorizations of the different laws that pertain to students with disabilities since 1965. The bedrock is that first one, the Elementary Secondary Education Act. So that's the very first, and everything built upon that. As you know, the first law in special ed was the Education of All Handicapped Children's Act, EHA, and that was in the mid-70s. And then when we say a reauthorization, about every 5 to 8 years, all laws in our country are put up for kind of public hearings to hear from the public on what is working with that law and what needs to change. So reauthorizations just means open it up to the public and making changes if necessary. Now, if you notice in the 90s, we changed the law in special ed to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act to be more appropriate as far as terminology. Now, most importantly, if you look to the right, those are the emphasis as we went from the very beginning to where we're at today. So there was a point where we started with just getting children into public schools, because there was times where parents would take their child to a public school and that child might have had a really severe disability, and the school would say, you know, we just can't serve your child. We just don't have the expertise or the funding. Actually, my career started at the American Fork Training School, and I remember going in there with just hundreds and hundreds of children that were not receiving any education in a lot of cases. And so that all changed as this law passed. We talked a lot of, 504 came into play in that early stage, and it was Part C of 504 is all about physical access. So again, that was our emphasis. And then we talked a lot about parent rights, procedural safeguards, free appropriate public education, the IEP, least restrictive environment. And starting in the late 90s, early 2000s, we shifted our attention to accountability and results. But all of the panels before you dealt with those other three issues, and that was important during that period of time. And the reason we came up and we improved in a lot of cases, it was because of panels and their recommendations and advice. So you are sitting in your chair, and in the history of special education, you are now shifting your attention to this result focus, which to me is really exciting. Compliance is still important, and OSEP is not forgetting that, and the state is not forgetting that. But now we're talking about making sure that our kids are improving. And when they do leave high school, that they're prepared for either college, career. And that's obviously for you parents sitting here, that's very important for you. So, that kind of leads us, and we're not going to spend a lot of time, but as a panel member, you need to have some background, and I believe you all do, on, the parent movement, the whole period of our history where there was exclusion. We moved from there to inclusion, the period of institutionalization, again, the Elementary Education Act, civil rights, the evolution of our law and the name of our law. We're now at a zero reject. I think your state director, Steve Cook, coined that phrase, all means all. We do not turn away any child. And now this whole movement of a multi-tier system of support and making sure that we get to children at risk before they're even considered for special education. So general ed, getting involved and making sure that the needs of all children are addressed when they are manifested in their, whether it be behavior, academic, healthcare issues, etc. So you're going to see a lot of the MTSS. We already have seen that in the reauthorization of the Every Child Succeeds Act, and as we see IDA emerge and reauthorize, we're going to see a lot of language there in regards to MTSS. And again, we've gone from this access to results focus now. So, and again, the reason for that is two main things in my estimation is parents, because parents played a critical role during, between 65 and currently, just individually and advocating. You have people like Laura Lee here from the Disability Law Center that serves in an advocacy role, and you have those agencies in every state that is helpful in moving this cause forward. So again, making sure again that another thing that's changed is this language issue and how we refer to individuals with disabilities. So using people first language, making sure, again, there's access, there's equality, inclusion, and so forth. So just the very fact that our language has changed over these years is really, really critical. Again, remembering that all students are general ed students first. And I think I'm seeing a real movement right now to create a seamless system of education in our country. And even in special ed, we've compartmentalized ourselves. We have Part C, we have preschool, Section 619, we have Part B, and so we're, I guess my dream, it'll probably never happen in my lifetime, that we have one federal law in our country, and that one federal law includes special education. So we don't have special ed law, a general ed law, and so forth. We just bring it all together, and that'll make it much easier for parents of children with disabilities. And then secondly, special ed was never intended to be a place or a program, but support and services that are for those that are eligible. We know that we need resource rooms, we need self-contained programs. There are times where we need to have those as part of the least restrictive environment, but again, to the maximum degree possible, special ed should be a support to general ed. And you are all way too young to remember Mr. Ed, but general ed plus special ed equals Mr. Ed. So that, or I should say Miss Ed to be appropriate, but it's all about unification. Okay? Pardon? And horses too. And so 40 years, and we've gone kind of up this staircase, and that's where we're at. And 40 years, many of you parents are not even 40 years old. But we've been on this journey, and it is a great journey, and we all should be proud of it, because in a very short period of time, I know it sounds long, but 40 years in the grand scheme of things is not a long time. We've changed a whole educational system and mindset. When I think in my mind, my experience at American Fork, and now I get into public schools periodically, and I see kids out and about integrated in general ed. That's a major, major accomplishment. So we all should feel very proud of that. Are we there yet? No, but we're getting there. So again, something really important for you to be mindful of is we have accountability now at all systems, from the student system, school district, state, with the annual performance report, state performance plan, levels of determination. Talked about the state's level of determination, but every district in the state of Utah and every early childhood program is in one of 4 levels of determination. Bless you. So we have meets requirements, needs assistance, needs intervention, and needs substantial intervention. And those determinations just came out, I think, this week. So Glenna might have some information on that. So again, the focus is changing from compliance to results, but compliance is very important. And in my history, and especially as a resource teacher, special ed teacher, if you're out of compliance, kids are being affected, or a child might be affected. So that's very important. Membership, again, this is the federal regulation. Must consist of members appointed by the governor or official authorized under state law. So how does that work in Utah? This is right out of your bylaws, appointed by the state superintendent, so that's who appoints you, based upon the state education agency recommendation. Your term is 3 years commencing on July 1st. So for you new members, your term will officially start July 1st. Individuals can be reappointed to a second term, so you're able to up another term. A mentor could be assigned to a new member, and Maggie, has that happened recently? Is that normal? You know, I like that in your bylaws, because it does give you that opportunity. If you truly feel you need a mentor, then you would talk with Maggie about it, and that could be arranged. So, so that's where you're at with your bylaws. You know, members of this group should be representative of the culture of the state of Utah. So, cultures, rural, urban, gender issues. This is not legally, but it's best practice. In your bylaws, it says the person selected to represent a specific category may, in Section 6, may have experience across categories. So you could represent more than one category. Actually, I have a letter into the Office of Special Ed Programs right now asking about the dual membership issue, because it is coming up in other states. So when I talked with OSEP on the phone a couple of weeks ago, they agreed with dual membership, but they had some, there was some different issues that probably panels should be thinking about as they appoint people in a dual membership role. But there's some states out there that just, they don't have enough people to fill all the positions. So, like Julie might be representing private schools, but she might also be connected with another state, and she could serve that. Now, OSEP says, do that in the last resort, but it is permissible. Consideration, again, should be given to balance, and this talks about different categories in Utah: urban, rural, minorities, again, severe, moderate disabilities, etc. The majority of this group needs to be individuals with disabilities and parents of children with disabilities, and that is a federal requirement. So 51% of this group must meet those two categories. Rebecca and Maggie, are you okay on that issue? Okay, great. And again, think about it. Who better can advise the state than a parent of a child with a disability that lives this every day, or an individual with a disability that lives this every day? So those are critical groups. Now, when you look at, these are the different membership requirements, and you have this in your packet, your green sheet. So again, Karen asked that question: parents of children with disabilities, ages birth through 26. So if you're a parent of a child with a disability, your child needs to be in that age range. And I've told this story before with you that have been here, but I was called by the state director in Hawaii to come down in February to do an orientation for his panel. And I said, well, do I really have to go to Hawaii in February? I did it. But I took one for the team. There were a number of other staff members that were willing to go, but yeah, that's when seniority really helps a lot. But when I got down there, I had dinner with the state director, and he says, it's great to have you here, but I do have an ulterior motive. And I said, well, what's that? And he says, well, our panel chair has been on the panel, I think, since 1975. Her child was 52 years old. And this had just come out. And he said, would you mind meeting with her tomorrow for breakfast and letting her know that she no longer is eligible? Well, she was an institution in Hawaii, very highly respected, just a wonderful person. But I did meet with her, and I showed her the regulation, and she just broke down, and it was not a pretty sight. But anyway, I pulled out these these categories, and I said, well, her first name was Sylvia. I said, Sylvia, is there any of these other categories that you might fit under? And it just so happened that she did. And so then I went back to the state director. I said, is it okay if Sylvia serves in this role? Oh, that would be wonderful. So anyway, she's still on that panel to this day, and it all worked out. So the bolded print is new since 2004. And so, again, states can go above and beyond these requirements and add other members, but this is minimal. So, Maggie, do you have them all covered there? Or Rebecca? Okay, great. So we have everybody there. Yes. It is very hard. And, you know, I'd mentioned your tenure of 3 years to ups, but especially the state education agency people, there might even have to be exceptions where that person needs to serve more than 2 terms.
Yeah, and like Tanya, who represents foster care, that's because she's the most relevant person, or whatever, maybe I'm using the wrong term, but she is the person who best fits that category on their staff to represent on this panel. And so it's kind of whoever they suggest to us is in that, and Tanya has served for many years now.
I believe the actual bylaws say that it's appointed by the director of the Department of Human Services.
Well, it is, but it still goes through
beyond 3. And it can go beyond 3 years.
Oh, it can, right.
We take their recommendation because it's their person.
So yeah, there will be exceptions, and in some cases, like Tanya's, it might be a lifetime appointment. So. You know, the nice thing about being here, though, is you hear everything firsthand. You know, when I pulled the last couple of reports that Glenna gave, and just rich information. And I know people like Kathy and Davis takes that back and probably uses it. But you're right at the very tip of what's happening here in Utah, so it's great. Utah membership, again, is the same as the federal regulations. So the only thing I'm hearing out there that might change, I think we're going to see some changes in the membership requirements. And the one that I'm hearing more is adding a student that has a disability to the panel. And some states are already doing that. There are some challenges around that you need to consider. But some states will have a student in the secondary level with a disability, and some perhaps that are now attending either in a career or a college or university setting. And so you get those categories. But yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. A recent OSEP letter, I was asked from a state. Sometimes I'm asked by states to ask questions to OSEP because they don't want to be identified. So there's a lot of letters to Copenhagen out there from OSEP. But this, do parents that are have a child served under Section 504 accommodation plan, would they be considered membership here? And OSEP basically said no. That letter is out there if you want to see it. They could serve on this panel, but they would not be a voting member. And so the law is around IDA and IDA eligible children, and so, that makes sense. Again, important priorities for you: read your bylaws, attend your meetings, do your homework prior to the meeting to the maximum degree possible. Very important to represent your stakeholder group, participate, work as a team, and ultimately make a difference. So those are some important things to consider. Again, training and orientation. I think it's really important to make sure that you're all on the same page. And these are some resources that you probably need at your hands. I think Rebecca provides a lot of this. Your bylaws. Probably need to have some familiarity with the Utah open meeting requirements. I gave you the federal org chart, but where do you fit in the state? And Glenn will explain that too. Your panel annual report. I'm not sure you're doing that.
We're not. We haven't for a number of years.
Yeah.
We have the public requirement to have everything out there for the public, and we have it also on our website for a number of years.
Okay.
Past each year, so we haven't been doing that. We used to do it.
Yeah. And that's okay. Actually, that requirement was taken out of IEDA in 2004. So there used to be a requirement. There's no longer. That's discretionary. So a number of states are not. But like Rebecca said, there's all this information, your minutes, everything that you're suggesting. I pulled up something that I found that you put together here on school guidance counselors access. Wonderful. This is great. Yeah. Now, Part C, the Interagency Coordinating Council, the regulations still require that they submit an annual report. You need general information on the state education agency staff, and I believe you get that today. Just acronyms, your meeting schedule, reimbursement. All of the things that are on the right are just things that you might need access to as you study different things. But usually Glenna and her staff cover those items. Again, tenure we've talked about, and yours is 3 years with 2 ups. Officers and leadership. Again, this is right out of your bylaws. Elected officials shall be a chair and a chair-elect. The chair-elect shall assume position of the chair the following July 1st. So, Maggie, has there been elections then? Or for the, I know you were the vice chair last year. So is there elections for the new? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Right.
We had some discussion about some things that had come up.
Okay. This is Maggie's job here, or part of her job. Yeah. Maggie, do you want to say any more about leadership or how that works here? Okay, great. Again, representing your stakeholder group, very important. And this is one of your most significant contributions. But again, how do you do that? I mean, how does Catherine, who has a beautiful little baby over there, but how does she reach out to other parents in the state of Utah. Your bylaws say members have the further responsibility of establishing and maintaining contact with persons, groups, associations having an interest in the welfare of students with disabilities, so as to remain knowledgeable and informed relative to public and private interests in special ed. So again, reaching out. The chair, this is kind of in the, I've switched this slide. This is back to more of the chair, the chair of the USEP, I guess. In the absence of the chair-elect or designee as the only member of the panel authorized to speak publicly, and then only in accordance with the panel recommendations or position statement. So Maggie's the only one with that authorization, with Glenna's blessing, I guess, to go to another group like the state board or somewhere else and give some sort of a presentation or a suggestion around a particular issue. She would be doing that at your blessing, probably taking a vote or consensus, and also Glenna. That's fairly unusual, but it does happen. It just did happen. Okay. Okay. What was that issue around?
It was regarding a change about informed consent for students on guardian long involved.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Lorelei.
We compiled comments here, and then I read it, I presented it to the board.
Wonderful. So that does happen, and it has happened very recently. So thank you, Amy. Again, you should not represent, members may not represent themselves as spokespersons for the panel or the U.S. Or the Utah Office of Education or the State Board, unless you have that authorization to do that. Again, pragmatically, how does Kathleen do this? Think of yourself as that middle circle. You might belong to other professional organizations. You might go to conferences. You might be on other committees. You might be on other boards in your workplace. You might come in contact with your stakeholder group. So you reach out to the maximum degree possible. So Kathy gets together with the other state or school district directors periodically. If there's issues and priorities that you're dealing with here, she might ask her fellow director, well, how do you feel about this? So if you're able to reach out to one other person or 20 other people, it's okay. There's not a magic number there. You just do the very best you can. Okay? Okay. Again, a purpose for you is to provide policy guidance with respect to special ed and related services for children with disabilities in Utah. So your job is to provide policy guidance and with respect to special ed and related services. The panel should be actively involved in meaningful work and providing advice to the state education agency. So you should be a working panel. I know some panels where they just come and they listen to presentations and reports, but that's it. And I feel a lot of frustration with those kind of panels because they want to do something. They want to make recommendations. They want to make change. So, as far as your bylaws, the panel is involved in advisory role at appropriate times in the USOE decision-making process. The USOE designee, the State Director of Special Ed, carries out regulatory responsibilities defined in IDA and shall work in partnership with the panel. the panel advises the USOE as it monitors special ed programs and local education agencies and private schools. Monitoring activities are under the direction of the state director. So periodically, Glenna will be reporting monitoring findings to this group. And if you see any red flags out there, then those are times to have those discussions and, if appropriate, make recommendations. So your job is you serve as advisory to the State Office of Education, not directly to the State Superintendent or Board of Education. So you advise the State Director. You're not advocacy, you're not an advocacy group, but there is a role for advocacy. And again, advocacy means to take sides, to support something, plead your case, favor a position, or to argue that the very nature of your title, advisory panel. There is a place for advocacy at panel meetings. During discussions, you might take sides, favor a position, support a position. However, in the final analysis, hopefully the panel can come to consensus and provide meaningful advice that leads to change. So there is a time where, you know, maybe Mallory appears to be very, you know, she takes a position, she favors a position. But again, ultimately, after all your discussions, it's up to Maggie to bring this group to consensus. And if she can't do that, she might call for a vote through Robert's Rules of Order. But it's okay to be passionate around certain issues. Again, there are groups here in the state of Utah that are advocacy in nature, protection advocacy, disability organizations, professional organizations. Laura Lee is from the Disability Law Center, and she is plays that role, and she does a very good job of that. So, not here, no. Now she can step out of that role and maybe provide public comment as a member of that group or a private citizen, but as her role here, she can. Advisory, again, that's what you're all about. You give advice, inform, counsel, recommend, suggest, or to guide. So that is your job. And this is how it works pragmatically. And I really like the idea that every June or July you come to this meeting, and this afternoon you will be setting some priorities for your coming year or so. So, you know, if we start at the top, you have a issue or priority. Glenna and her staff are going to bring in resources, information, and data on that priority to better inform you so you can make a more informed decision. Then you're going to bring in your member perspective and experience. And coming back to Mallory, that's where she might come across as favoring a certain approach or being a little bit more adversarial, which again is fine. Then you talk about anybody that you've reached out to in your stakeholder group around that priority. And if you have, that's fine. If you haven't, that's fine as well. And then Maggie's going to lead you into discussion around it. And ultimately, you're going to give objective advice, which will be noted. And this is critical because you don't have an annual report. It'll be noted in your minutes and followed up on. Or you're going to write a position paper like this. And that hopefully is going to lead to change and improve services for children with disabilities. Now, there's times where you're going to give advice and recommendations. And will Glenna take all that advice and recommendations and implement it 100%? Probably not. There might be times where she'll say, you know, I like this part, but we're going to go in a different direction. Or she might even say, you know, we're just going in this different direction. But again, Glenna will let you know the rationale why the state is moving in a certain direction. So just know that all of your recommendations and advice might not come to fruition, but a good share of them will. Again, best practice, a lot of panels, they notify and receive approval from the director, and you do this before taking advice to another person or agency. Some panels at the end of their meeting put together a one-page summary of all the recommendations that were made during that period of time. And this is critical, and Rebecca does a great job, but you know, I sit at panel meetings where I hear somebody give a great recommendation, and then they kind of get sidetracked, and it just is kind of left behind, and it's never acted upon. So again, that's one of Maggie's responsibilities too, to make sure that she's listening, and if there is a good recommendation, to carry it forth in a discussion and ultimately a consensus. Glenna's role, again, just know that the position of the State Director of Special Education has become very difficult. I'll be in Washington, D.C. in a couple of weeks, and we're orienting, I think, 5 or 6 brand new state directors. We do that 2 or 3 times a year, and there was a time we might get 1 or 2 directors in the country turnover. And last year we had, I think it was 18 or 19 directors left their jobs. So it's just a very stressful job. So again, Glenna needs your support. These are her roles. You know, she's ad hoc to this group. She's not a voting member. She's basically a support to you, and she provides information, and she provides the financial funds that are necessary to operate a group like this. She'll talk about different issues. Today she'll give a report as it says on your agenda. So anyway, bottom line, she is support in concert with Rebecca. They serve as your main support. Functions, this is probably the most important thing we'll talk about today. I think you need a really good understanding of your 7 functions under IDA. And your functions, when I looked at your bylaws, they are exactly the same as IDA. So you do not go above and beyond, which is good, I think. So what the federal law says is what you are. The first one is the most important in my estimation, and that is advise the state of unmet needs within the state of the education of children with disabilities. So if there's an unmet need, that means that there's children out there that are not receiving a free, appropriate public education. So in your, as you go about your lives, if you see that that is an issue, it would be your responsibility to bring that to the attention. Some examples of how this is played out in other states. I remember one state, I was attending the panel meetings, and there was a lot of complaints and due process around working with children with disabilities, or not disabilities, but autism. And so the panel, they've seen that data, they checked with the state monitoring data, they looked at other resources, and in fact that was the major issue in the state. So they recommended to the state director that there be enhanced training for educators and administrators on working with children with autism. They did that. About a year and a half later, that complaint data due process dropped way off. And so there was an obvious connection between, again, giving more training to educators and receiving less complaints in due process. Another issue in another state is students not being adequately served in juvenile and adult correctional facilities, and that came out through state monitoring data. And so the panel in that state recommended that there be a study that, again, the state more closely monitor those facilities, provide professional development to those facilities, which happened. And in that particular state, those children are now being served adequately and receiving their IEP services. So that function is real critical. The second is to publicly comment on any rules or regulations proposed by the states regarding children with disabilities. This will really come into play when we do get a change in our federal law, because when we get that change, then the federal regulations will have to be modified, and then the state regulations will have to be modified to be in concert with the federal regulations. So you will become very closely involved with those new Utah regulations. So any rule or regulation that is proposed in the state of Utah needs to be brought before this group for your comment. Has that ever happened that you can think of? Okay. Okay. So, you know, I read that somewhere that you did, the state did do that. We were involved with Arizona a number of years ago, and they proactively, I think that's very proactive, they went through all their state rules and regs, and that they were brought before that panel. So, yeah, whenever a law or a regulation is proposed or revised, that needs to be brought to your attention. Number 3 is around data. Number 3 is probably the function that's grown the most since 2004. And that is advise the state in developing evaluations and reporting data to the Secretary, and they mean the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, under Section 618. Remember, Section 618 is all about the data requirements. And so any data issues need to be brought before you. The most common right now is around the state performance plan, the annual performance report, your state systemic improvement plan, your state identified measurable result. All of those issues need to be brought before this panel for comment and review. Number 4, corrective action plans. If the state of Utah was ever found to be out of compliance by the Office of Special Education Programs, then you would have to be part of providing suggestions and advice on a corrective action plan on how to rectify that issue. And so I can't remember any recent issues here in Utah. As you look across the country, there's a lot of emphasis now on fiscal issues in special ed. And there's a number of states out there that are under compliance agreements because of fiscal issues. And so they're needing to make those changes. Coordination of services. This is around memorandums of understandings or coordinated service plans. In state government and in federal government, different branches of government have to put together a memorandum of understanding on how they're going to communicate with each other. So an example would be the Department of Ed here in Utah would probably have a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Health and how we're going to communicate with each other. So whenever a new MOU is either created or revised, Glenna would bring that before you for your comment. That is pretty rare, but it does happen. Number 6, I think this one will go away with the reauthorization, but if there is a due process hearing in the state of Utah that goes from beginning to the findings and decisions, then Glenna would have to bring that into the panel and review those findings and recommendations with you, just to bring you up to speed on what some of the issues are around due process. Now, in the state of Utah, I don't know how many, I know you only, if you get any, it's 1 or 2 due process hearings a year. So that's not a huge thing. I know Glenna periodically has her dispute person come in and report on mediations and complaints and due process, and does it all as a package. I think this was meant for larger states. I was in this state of California a number of years ago, and their dispute person reported on the due process hearings that had gone to completion in that quarter, and it was 63. And so as he reported that, about 40% of those involved extended school year services or the denial of extended school year services. So that was a major red flag for the panel. They asked the state director to look at their monitoring data to see if they were coming up with similar findings. They did. And so they decided to advise the director to provide guidance and training throughout the state on extended school year. So they did that, and again, within a couple of years, those numbers went way down on complaints and due process for extended school year. If you happen to get one of these, just know that an N size of 1 is really dangerous to make a conclusion that it's a state systemic problem. So make sure that you look at other data. Number 7, finally, doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And that is when, and Jennifer, I should have her explain all this because this is a little bit complicated, but you know, a number of years ago we had a recession, a national recession, and a lot of states, their tax revenue went way down. And so obviously they had to cut programs. In special education at the state and local level, now at the local level there are exceptions, but generally whatever you spend 1 year in special ed, you need to spend at least that much the next year. You can't reduce that, or that's a violation of maintenance of fiscal effort or maintenance of effort. So in a number of states across the country, they just did not have the money to maintain effort. So they had to ask for a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education that they could reduce effort. And a number of states did that. They were granted those waivers. Some states, the waivers were not granted. But if there's less money spent from 1 year to the next, what is the assumption? If you're spending less money, maybe services are being compromised. So the states that did get the waiver, they were asked that their special ed advisory panel be really mindful of that, and you know, if there was any red flags because of the lack of money or the reduction of money, then you know, there would be action around that. OSEP watches those states very closely when they receive a waiver. Now we have a number of states in our country now that are considering a waiver because of the gas prices going way down, and they're states that their economy is based on oil and gas, and so their tax revenues have gone dramatically down. So this might become an issue in a few of those states. The only other thing as far as function, this is just out there right now, and it's around significant disproportionality in special ed. And there are proposed regulations now. You know, and I'll read this one. States should retain the discretion to determine the risk ratio threshold above which disproportionality is significant, so long as the threshold is reasonable and based on advice from their stakeholders, including the state advisory panel. So this is right in the proposed regulations. And if this goes through, then panels will be asked. Glenna will be leading discussions with her staff and this group and perhaps other people on what is disproportionate in the state of Utah. For example, around cultural one example might be around cultural groups and the percentage of those kids in special education. Native American children, for example, is there a disproportionate amount of Native American children in special ed versus other cultures? And so states will be asked, this is a good thing because usually the feds set those risk ratios. This is saying states will, as long as they're reasonable. If they're not reasonable, then OSEP will have an exception. Again, as this all relates to your bylaws, the panel shall develop recommendations or position statements regarding significant issues in education of students with disabilities and communicate such recommendations to the USOE. It is the responsibility of each panel member to raise issues that relate to their area of responsibility, giving input into position papers, publications, and policy recommendations. So this is that part of your bylaws that kind of relate to the functions as well as your advisory responsibilities. All formal recommendations or position papers shall be addressed to the State Director of Special Ed and shall reflect approval of a simple majority of members present. I look for your quorum requirements, and this is where it does refer to quorum, and I like this language because it doesn't call for half the membership to be present before you can carry on business. Approval of a simple majority of members present. So whoever shows up for that day, it's the majority of those people. That's your quorum issue. The director may provide copies of all formal recommendations or position papers to the applicable associate superintendent, the state superintendent, the Board of Education, or other advisory groups concerned with the delivery of services for students with disabilities. So it's really up to Glenna to take those recommendations to these higher levels. Any questions or comments before we move on? I know this is a lot of information, but we're getting close to the end here. Again, bylaws, very important, and they're so important that I put a copy in your packet, and Rebecca passed you out a copy. So these are, and I check this with your bylaws, but these are the things that normally occur in most bylaws. So these are all issues that are covered. And I think obviously the annual report would not be because you do not have the annual report. But one thing that we do at TASE when we go from state to state is the first thing we do is look at the bylaws and make recommendations if necessary. Again, open meeting requirements. The open meeting requirements, if you're following Robert's rules, but yeah, as I look at open meeting requirements in various states, they do vary from state to state. So, and usually there's somebody in state government that's over open meeting requirements, and if necessary, I'm sure they would come here and do a 15-minute presentation. Again, Robert's Rules of Order, first edition, 1876. I think the last edition has 563 pages in it, and I know Maggie has read all those, and she knows how to, it's very complicated, but the handouts that I gave you are probably sufficient for this group. Again, collaborative agenda development. Maggie, talk about how the agenda is framed, and is it appropriate for Elizabeth, for example, if she feels there should be something on the agenda at the next meeting? Can she so recommend that? Yeah. So it's something that Maggie and Glenna and Rebecca get together, and that's a collaborative effort. Again, Rebecca always sends that out into advance of the meeting. Most panels in the country meet 4 to 6 times. I do know some states that meet every month, but they're normally really big states like California or Washington, D.C. does, Texas. Some panels allow a virtual meeting once a year, and it's normally in the winter when it's just a little harder to get from point A to point B. Again, the whole goal is consensus. So again, Maggie's job is to try to bring people to an agreeable solution. And consensus is finding an acceptable proposal that all members can support. You might not get everything you want, but it's not enough to publicly support. So Amy here, there still might be some things she would have loved to be in the recommendation, but there's enough there that when she walks out the door, she'll publicly support it. And so when you come to consensus, just know that consensus is not a unanimous vote, a majority vote, a vote of any kind. It's not 100% satisfaction. This is supposedly how our government should work, but I'm not sure that's the case. If you do have guests, have them sit in a separate section. Retain the integrity of the panel. And some states have a lot of guests and a lot of public input. This is a typical agenda, and most of it is the left side. The right side is might come at various times during the year, but the old business part is really critical because that's the point where Maggie, if there was a recommendation from your last meeting, that would become old business, and she would probably either report or have somebody else report on what the status of that recommendation or that action might have been. Also, public comment. I was in a state 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it threw me because I did an all-day orientation for that particular panel. And then the next day, they had a regular meeting, and I had a 2-hour presentation. And when I walked in, there were 80 people from the public there, including the state superintendent and assistant superintendent. But during their public input process, it was just one person after another person. So when you, so yeah, it just varies from every state. You know, that advice recommendations, again, at the end of a meeting, it's always nice to recap and say, okay, these were the issues that you brought up as advice during this meeting. Again, we've talked about FERPA and confidentiality, and in your bylaws, it also addresses confidentiality. So just be mindful of that. Compensation, again, you're reimbursed for reasonable necessary expenses. Rebecca, do you want to say any more about this one, or?
Actually, in recent years, there haven't been panel members that have been claiming it, but you are entitled to travel reimbursement, and I have forms. I didn't bring any down with me today, but if you are requesting travel reimbursement, then there is a form that must be filled out. We get those reimbursements out.
So any questions on that, you just ask Rebecca. So again, public input, these are the normal procedures. Again, there should be a sign-in sheet. People can write Glenna or Maggie and submit a written comment. Some states offer a link where you can go right on and fill out a written comment and submit it. Again, it's a standing agenda item, and you should have ground rules, which again, in your bylaws, if you look at the bylaws, let's look at those really quickly, because I believe right at the end of your bylaws, there is a look at the last page. Well, there's not on this one. Rebecca, there used to be a one-pager that had all the okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so those were actually very comprehensive. It's important to limit public comment to 2 to 3 minutes per person. And remember, when somebody is commenting publicly, that this group does not have to respond to that. You just listen. Rebecca would probably give them maybe a 30-second, that your time's just about up. But there's no need to comment on public comments. So again, official minutes, they're on your website. Your minutes should be fairly brief and to the point. It's important to include all motions. Most importantly, include a section or make sure advice is so noted, and so forth. Committees, they are permissible. A lot of states you have, and I believe that's the case here in Utah, you have an executive committee. You might have committees based on the priorities that you set, and I believe you do, and you'll set those priorities this afternoon. There might be a committee for bylaws and membership issues. This is your bylaws that address task forces or work groups. Again, they can be established in designated time period. That's really important. I've seen some committees and some panels go on forever, and they become part of the culture of that group. So it's important to set a time frame and move on after you've done what you should be doing. Again, a representative of the task force will report on current activities at the panel meetings. So if you do have a work group, they would report out, or the lead of that task force. Task force will draft recommendations for discussion and action by the panel as requested. Membership shall be determined by the leadership team. So that would be Maggie and the vice chair, and with Glenna's input. Membership on the task force may include representatives from the field as well as from the panel. So you might have people on those work groups that are not technically members, but they might be specialists of some sort. So that would be appropriate. Okay, panel priorities. And again, you're one of the few panels that I work with that actually go through an exercise of setting priorities. But it's important to set priorities annually, keep those limited. When you set your priorities, these are just some suggestions, but study current and emerging critical issues that impact services for children with disabilities. Look beyond the state to regional and national trends, because perhaps there's something out there that will ultimately impact Utah. Receive input from the state education agency and you as panel members. Very important to look at your data. Your dispute activity, your state systemic improvement plan, your annual performance report, section 6 to 18 data, monitoring data, your level of determination. look at all of those sources of data. And then ultimately focus on 3 or 4 priorities. Again, we've all seen those IEPs with way too many goals and way too many objectives. And the ones that are that way usually are not as effective as if we focus on really current needs. Remember, every time you say yes to someone or something, you say no to someone or something. So Jan said yes to this meeting, but I'm sure she said no to some other commitments out there. So it's important to choose your priorities wisely. And again, once you finish one priority, you're going to jump right into another priority. There's always going to be something to do. Annual report, we're going to skip over that. And again, finally, just emerging state special ed advisory panel roles in different areas. General supervision is just, simply stated, it's Glenna's job description. Just making sure that you've got a state performance plan, you're carrying on monitoring activities, you have an effective dispute resolution process, all of those, making sure that all the IDA regulations and requirements are being implemented appropriately here in the state of Utah, making sure that you have knowledge of and some involvement in the state performance plan, the annual performance report, the state systemic improvement plan, a knowledge of your current level of determination, and work on results-driven accountability. These are 2 issues that OSEP is, focusing on, I guess, to a certain degree, and that is the whole area of dispute resolution, mediation, complaint investigation, due process hearing. They've developed a self-assessment that they've offered out to states, not required to fill out by states, but most states are going through that as self-assessment to see where they're at in the various areas of dispute resolution. The other area is youth in adult and youth correctional facilities. And again, a self-assessment has been developed, and states are completing that self-assessment to kind of get a baseline on where they're at in that area. Who is the adult and youth correctional person here? No one here, right? Okay. Those are kind of hard to come by. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, every state right now is looking at and dealing with these issues to a certain degree. How much you will be involved in these issues will be up to Glenna. When you look at all the increase of responsibilities since 2004, these have all come up since 2004. So, the emphasis on fiscal results, the levels of determination, annual performance report. That verification used to be the way that OSEP monitored. Now it's called differentiated monitoring. And Glenn will probably talk a little bit about that. And state performance plan, again, the state systemic improvement plan, data, state identified measurable results. This is a short list of what's come up since 2004. So everything, again, Glenna and other state directors were responsible for in 2004. None of that went away. All of this was added on too. And so again, coming back to the complexity of the state director's job. Again, RDA, you're going to hear a lot about this, but a focus on results. Glenna's going to talk about it and perhaps making suggestions around RDA. You know, in conclusion, when I look at panels across the United States, these are the common denominators of effective panels. So again, a close working relationship with your state director, very important. Membership orientation, that's what we've been doing. Approaching your work as advisory and not advocacy in nature, very critical. I know those panels that cross that line, and it's counterproductive. Meaningful work, and you're going to get into priority setting today, so that'll define your work. Your annual meeting to set priorities. Priorities are determined by data, and they're determined by the panel as a whole, not one individual. So ongoing communication with the state education agency, the panel, and the executive committee. Some connection with Part C, or at least a familiarity with what Part C and the Interagency Coordinating Council. The reason that's important, a number of the indicators, if you look at them on Part C and B, there's a relationship, or, for example, the indicator of transition from C to B services. That's a common indicator for both Part B and Part C. So just making sure that you understand that. Again, support of the state's improvement efforts, established bylaws, and Glenna talked a little bit about that. Dedicated support staff, that's Rebecca. Meeting 4 to 6 times a year. You meet 4 times a year. Collaborative agenda building in service regarding confidentiality. You know, some marketing of this group, making sure that other stakeholders in the state of Utah know who you are and what you do. And again, if members of your stakeholder group want to come to you, they can do that. Again, annual report is not an issue. Again, a focus on results. So those are the you know, the critical indicators. And as I went down through that, you know, most of those are in place for you here in Utah. As you move forward, again, making sure you do it with teamwork and working together as a group. You have to have good chemistry. You have to trust each other. You need to work together. Again, if you do this, none of us is as smart as all of us combined. But yet, the importance of one person making a difference. So as you're sitting in your chair and you're thinking about something, but you're hesitating to say it, just say it. There's no question that is unimportant or no comment. And in a lot of cases, as I sit at panel meetings, it's those times where somebody raises their hand and they comment that it ultimately really makes a difference. So, you know, and you new members, I know it's a little tougher because this is all new to you. But just know that that will come. And then again, as you move forward, keeping this in mind, you know, I always like to sit, and as people are talking, I like to think, okay, how can this, whatever is being discussed, how does this refer back to children and youth with disabilities? So there's 2 things that you have to think about as you're having those discussions. Number one, what is this discussion, or what does it have to do with one of our functions? I can't remember, Rebecca, is that somewhere out there, the functions? Yeah.
I believe it's on our website, and
you know, just a suggestion, and yeah, here's the functions. So yeah, a lot of states will just print their functions on the back. And Rebecca also, I forgot to mention, but she does, you know, she puts your stakeholder group right on your nameplate, so you can look around and see who but just making sure that as you're discussing things, it relates, and then ultimately it has some connection with kids in the state of Utah. So, 5 minutes early, but I got started a little early too. So, any questions, comments, anything I confused you on at all? For you more veteran members, any advice or suggestions that you would have for any of these new members? And if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to say, Maggie, any suggestions on your, because I know you've been on this panel for a while.
Bring a sweater. Sorry.
Good idea.
No, I think just making sure that your presence is here. I know it's hard to get to. It's a long meeting 4 times a year, but I think it's really important to recognize that, as John said, you are representing not just, you obviously at the meeting, you're representing a whole group of people, so it's important to keep that in mind.
Yes.
My suggestion would be don't be afraid to ask questions for clarification, because everybody here is very supportive, and we've all been where it was our first time here and had the same questions and stuff. So don't ever be afraid to ask questions.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else? Glenna, any final comments you want to make? Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Maggie, for having me here today. I appreciate being here, and best wishes as you move forward. This group has made a huge difference in the state of Utah, and for you new members, you'll make a huge difference as well. So thank you and best wishes to you. So, Maggie, I'll turn it to you.
Excellent. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Since we did end a little bit early and sort of failed to build in a break in between now and 2, we're going to take a 10-minute break. And so we'll be back at 18 after, which is the clock there is not exactly accurate. But so let's take a 10-minute break, and then we will move to Glenna and the State Systemic Improvement Plan. Okay, let's go ahead and come back as a large group. So if you look at your agenda, the next piece on the agenda is Glenna taking over for the State Systemic Improvement Plan and progress report on that. So yield the floor to Glenna.
Thank you. We're going to pass them in around that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Just, you need to take 2 pages. They're not stapled. I didn't have time to staple them, and they were brand new. So we're going to go ahead and send those. A couple things that I need to talk about. We're going to show you a PowerPoint. I'm going to introduce the USOE staff so that you know who you're dealing with, who the staff members are. So I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to go a little bit out of order, if that's okay with you. So the special ed rules status, they were set to be approved in the last board meeting, and the board took action to delay approval of those rules until August. They do have your input and considered your input very carefully and made most of the recommended changes. I'm trying to think, actually, if there's any that they didn't make, and I'm not aware of any. Lauralee, Maggie, are you aware? Okay. So those rules will come back up for approval in August, and at that time, if approved, will go into effect 30 days later. So it would be the beginning of September. At that time, then we will release copies of new copies of the Black Book of Rules. I don't know what color they'll be, and I do not care what color they'll be. So if anybody truly cares and would like to offer input, give it to Rebecca. They can't be watermelon, black, or goldenrod. Okay?
Yeah.
So just because that's how we tell the new versions. some pretty significant changes in the rules, and the timing's unfortunate because we'll start a new school year and then go into rule changes, so we can't train before the beginning of the school year, which will make that an interesting transition. Main changes, there's a new section for students who are in state custody, which is a great beginning. It's not complete yet. We're going to need to do quite a bit of work over the next year to come out with more technical assistance and possibly additional rules. It looks like we'll go from a 2-tier complaint system to a 1-tier complaint system, where instead of the current system where Utah is one of a few states, I think there may be one other, that allows the LEA to do the complaint investigation first and then the state to investigate if it's appealed, we'll go to one investigation by the state without an appeals process. Now, that doesn't mean that if the parents or the complainant disagrees, they would still have other dispute resolution options. Couple reasons why we're doing it. In our state, we have about 140 LEAs, and we have about 20 state complaints a year. It's pretty burdensome on LEAs who do not have complaints each year to find someone to investigate and learn the process. Second, the majority of them are appealed and we investigate, so we're kind of duplicating the work. We did add language in there that says even though we have a 1-tier process, nothing prohibits the LEA from working with the complainant to resolve and end the complaint. So it doesn't remove their ability to try to resolve it themselves. So that looks to be the way that it may go forward. Like I said, it may change based on additional public input if the board changes their mind. The other significant change that was in the last board approval is that they are requesting that transition be in place by age 14 instead of 16. So again, like I said, it goes through one more reading. There's still public input. People can still make their case. But that's where it was left at the last time. Any other comments from anyone?
So the next board meeting is not till August?
Correct.
August what?
Yeah, it is August. Okay, hold on, I'm looking. This is going to be scary because you guys are going to see what my schedule looks like. It's scary. On Monday, I had 6 meetings at the same time. It'll be the evening of August 11th and the daytime of August 12th. So it will go through a committee meeting somewhere between 6 and 10 p.m. on August 11th, and then it will come back up to the full board on August 12th, generally in the afternoon. So that's where we're at with the rules. We will probably know something around August about any potential changes to the bylaws also. So a couple of things, and this part's going to get kind of confusing, so don't get caught in the weeds. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about a phone call that I just was on when I left the room with OSEP at the U.S. Department of Education. And then I'm going to talk to you about our determination that we just received this week. So the paper that I handed out that looks like this is from the call that I was just on with OSEP. So OSEP has changed their monitoring and technical assistance process to be more results-driven rather than compliance-driven, similar to how Utah's system is set up. So they're looking at tiered assignments based on data that they're placing each state in. And the tiers are the same ones we use for a multi-tiered system of support, where universal supports are provided, people who need additional assistance can get targeted, and people who need additional assistance can get intensive. Okay, so that's what this letter is, and we received it about a month ago, and then we had the phone call today to talk about it. And the main part of the information is starting right here where it says results. So these data are federal fiscal year 2013. So it's 2016, and these decisions that they just made a month ago, are on 3-year-old data. Okay, and this is the part that gets confusing because there's so many years of data that are being used for different things. In September, they're going to release a new letter that's based on 2014 data. So this letter will only be in effect for about 4 months. There's 4 categories that they address with us. The first one is results on the first page. And on the second page, you see the 3 others: compliance, dispute resolution, and fiscal, so finance. I'm just going to go over the second page first. We're in the universal tier for each of those. And basically what that means is we're doing fine in those categories. I'm going to go over those data a little more specifically with you. The area that we are in a targeted tier for is results. And this shouldn't surprise most of you. You're going to see the data that they used. It has to do with participation of students with disabilities, they call them children with disabilities, on our statewide assessments. Participation of students with disabilities on the NAEP. So the NAEP is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. This is a voluntary assessment that is not supposed to contribute to any sanctions or processes. So I just want to point that out for you. And parents, when their children are selected to participate in this assessment, are sent home a letter that says your child doesn't have to do this. So we are held accountable through OSEP for participation and performance on this voluntary assessment. Okay? Makes all kinds of sense. Yeah. So you see those data there. And then our dropout rates and our graduation rates are also contributing to us being in the targeted. So you can see the data there. Then the next column is what the state is currently doing. And so you can see that we have technical assistance from several national centers. We have the National Center for Systemic Improvement, which works with us on our state systemic improvement plan around the areas of math, grades 6 through 8, and improvement. We also work with CEDAR, the Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform, and we're looking at higher ed teacher prep programs and licensure for special educators. So how do we prepare special educators to be effective instructors? Okay, so that's what those 2 are. Then they're missing a few. We also work with the National Data Center, which impacts these. We work with the Council of Chief State School Officers around school improvement efforts, assessment improvement efforts, formative assessments, those 3 areas. And we work with National Post-Secondary Outcome Centers around transition. So those are all the TA pieces that we have in place. So then OSEP, in the last column, OSEP describes what new technical assistance is available to us. Because of this targeted determination. And so it says they will provide targeted monitoring and support in improving graduation and dropout rates, improving participation on statewide assessments, and improving reading and math proficiency. So the conversation that I held with OSEP is important to you for several things. One of which is I completely agree that we need to improve results for students with disabilities. Students with disabilities need effective instruction that addresses their needs. They need access to core standards. We need to improve those results. We need to improve graduation and dropout rates. I disagree with the NAEP, right? I think if it's a voluntary assessment, then it's a voluntary assessment. But I agree with the other components. So what I expressed to OSEP is that I completely support them providing the state of Utah additional technical assistance in those 3 areas. And I requested that they provide us technical assistance. I specifically asked for them to look at the way they calculate. They require calculation of graduation and dropout rates because it's on a 4-year cohort, and it does not account for students who receive 5 and 6 year services. Do we need to improve our rates for the 4-year cohort? Yes, but it needs to look at the whole span, and it needs to tie and align with student outcome data. Indicator 14, which we also have available. And I think that they look at it in a very short-sighted manner and in a way that does not allow us to determine the root cause of the issue. So I requested that technical assistance. I reminded them that ESSA, which is out for public comment right now, allows states to look at longer cohorts for graduation, and requested that they consider that and provide technical assistance that is helpful to states. I requested that they support research that looks at how to improve math instruction for students with disabilities because there is very little research out there. And I requested that they support research that compares and aligns effective instruction strategies for all students and students with disabilities because the research is split. So we have research for all students that says these are the best strategies, and we have research for students with disabilities that say these are the best strategies, and they disagree. And nobody has aligned those and looked at what needs to happen for all kids. So that is what I asked them to provide, and now I'm waiting for an email and what they're going to provide us until September when they redo this. So just wanted to let you know of that. Uh-huh.
So in terms of the dropout rates and diplomas, is there a specific, you listed off a whole bunch of different groups that are doing TA for you. Is there a specific group that's doing it yet?
Yes, so that's coming from some of those post-secondary outcomes groups, and then there's some state groups that are working on specifically improving graduation and reducing dropout. And Susan Loving in our office is working for those. So that is that data, 2013. I'm going to move you ahead to the information that we got that is 2014 data. So it's 2 years old that I got this week. And I am happy to give you a copy of this. I just haven't had an opportunity, so I'm going to project it. And so this is our determination. And remember, so we had 3 tiers for differentiated monitoring and support. Then there are 4 determination levels that OSEP can make. Meets requirements is the best you can do. Under that is needs assistance, needs intervention, needs substantial intervention. Utah is in needs assistance again. And so these data, which I'm showing to you, show that we had 6, is it? I'll show you in just a second. Where did it go? And I'll give you a copy during lunch so that you guys can look at these. It says it's there. Okay. What is it? 1759. There we go. Okay, so last year, our overall percentage, you can see the percentage up here, and that we need assistance. Our overall percentage was 68.75. So we went up 10 percentage points from last year. We're still in the same determination. You can see our results. There were 24 points available, and we earned 15. So looking down here, these are our results score, and here's our actual data. And the best score that we can get is 2, and the worst score we can get is 0. Okay? So is that a little better? Okay. So This first one is a percentage of fourth grade students with disabilities participating in SAGE. So last year we had a 2 on this. We were at 92%. This time we have a 2 and we went up 0.52%. A percentage of 8th grade students participating. Last year we had a 1. We were at 88%. We dropped slightly at 87.91%. This is an area of need, and it's going to continue to be a struggle because we have a state law that allows parents to opt their children out. Okay, but remember, we also identified that students weren't being offered the opportunity, so it's kind of a catch-22. A percentage of fourth grade students with disabilities at or above a basic level on the NAEP. So here's the voluntary assessment. Last year we were at a 1 with 29%. We are at a 2 this year with 32%. So we've increased slightly. Percentage of fourth grade students who participated in the NAEP. Last year we were at a 0 with 78%. This year we're at a 1 with 92%. 8th graders scoring at or above basic on the NAEP. Last year we were at 0 with 29%. This year we're at a 1 with 30%. And 8th grade included in the testing, last year we were at 0 with 74%, and this year we're at a 1 with 89%. So you can see, with the exception of the 8th grade participation, which dropped 0.09, we improved everything. 9/100ths. Math. So math has been our area of focus with the SSIP, 6th through 8th. So fourth graders participating in SAGE, we had a 2 last year, we have a 2 this year. We went up 1.22. 8th graders participating in the math SAGE, we were at a 1 last year with 87. We're at a 1 this year and we dropped 0.5. Fourth graders on the NAEP, basic or above, we were at a 0 last year with 51%. And somehow we're at a 1 this year with 51%. I'm not going to point that out to them. Fourth graders participating in the NAEP. Last year we were at a 1 with 92%. This year we're at a 1 with 91%. Again, not going to point that out. 8th graders on the NAEP, basic or above. Last year we were at a 0 with 22%. This year we're at a 1 with 27%, which is a nice improvement in 1 year. 8th graders participation in the NAEP. Last year we were at a 1 with 88%. This year we're at a 1 with 89%. So again, you can see some overall progress. I just want to, the NAEP is a sample and it's voluntary and it's different kids each time. So those are we can't necessarily take credit for the changes there. Exiting data is exactly the same, which makes me think that they haven't recalculated it. So it's the same from year to year. Our compliance, we dropped 0.5%. Last year we had 100% for our compliance. This year we dropped in the area of timely and accurate state reported data. We lost 1 point and it dropped us 5%. And we had a state report that was submitted and had an error. So it's kind of a pain, but it's not hurting us. So I just kind of wanted to point out to you that we're in that determination. I think that we can see that we do need to improve results. I wanted to give you the data, show you that OSEP has placed us in a targeted tier for that. We'll have a new tier in September to look at. But I thought this would provide you some good data as you're thinking about priorities that you're going to want to consider. Another issue that has recently come up, and I will have more information for you on in September, is that we have been doing some external monitoring of students who are in state custody and different placements that they're in, whether they're in a group home, a secure facility, jail, an adult prison, things like that. And that is an area that does need improvement in the state. So I will have more data and more information for you in September on that. But when you look at your list of priorities and look at what you've addressed in the past, I don't know that you guys have considered or that we've had ongoing representation from those populations either at this meeting. And so that might be something that you want to consider. Any questions so far before I go into the staff PowerPoint? Yes.
So do you think that I know sometimes in special ed they go to resource and they don't have access to their grade level curriculum. Is this test that they're tested on their grade level curriculum even if they're fourth grade, even if they're working on a second or third grade level?
Yes, because they're supposed to they should still have access to their grade level core curriculum, and then special education should be addressing the gaps, not replacing the grade level curriculum with an alternate curriculum generally. For some students, they may be on an alternate, like the essential elements, where it's an alternate grade level for students with significant cognitive disabilities. But other than that, students should still have access to grade level instruction. Shouldn't be replaced. Okay, while I bring this up, a couple things just to let you know, things that I think will come up in our next meeting. I think that we'll need to talk about the annual performance report and any changes to targets or strategies. I think that we'll need to talk about the USEAP bylaws and what the state board has identified. We received some fiscal findings following a 6-year fiscal monitoring that's been in place since 2010. And so we'll want to address what those findings are and actions taken because of those. We currently have a due process hearing that's going on in July. And so I believe we'll have a decision that you guys will want to review. And then we'll want to review and discuss the final special ed rules and see if you guys have any input on training or technical assistance regarding those.
Another question.
Yep.
How, the new law that they said that teachers don't have to have a teaching degree to be teachers. Mm-hmm. How does that work with special ed?
So I can bring that up, and actually it's probably going to be easier to show you the rule. So I'll bring that up during lunch so you can see it because it's a brand new rule, and so they haven't put everything in place yet, but I'll show you. Okay, so just quickly, the special education staff. There's me with my short hair. Kim Fratto is a coordinator who replaced Jennifer Howell when Jennifer Howell left us. And Kim is a coordinator over effective instruction and least restrictive environments. So she is kind of the go-to person on standards-based IEPs, effective instruction, learning disabilities, LRE, those types of concepts. There's Leah Voorhees, who has been here as a coordinator for the past 6 years. And Leah is responsible for the state systemic improvement plan. And that she and another member of the staff work intensively with 9 LEAs that are small, medium, and large size. We call them the I-9s. Affectionately, who are part of our state systemic improvement plan. And Kathy Chisholm, who's representing Davis, is one of our I-9 LEAs, so she has lots of information about that. Becky Unker is a specialist on effective instruction, and she supports Leah with the SSIP work. She's also currently doing some work around math instruction with preschool students with disabilities. Betsy, you could tell we said if you don't have a picture, take it with your cell phone and send it to us. So we have some of those. So here, this is Betsy Sutherland, and she is the preschool specialist. She's generally here in this meeting, and she's planning on coming in this afternoon for the priority discussion. She had a meeting this morning. She is doing some tremendous work around least restrictive environment and having a full continuum of placement options for preschool so that we don't have special education preschools. We have preschools that include students with disabilities. So that's the large focus of her work. She is working on a project called RP2 that you're going to want to hear from her about, where it's looking at effective instruction in LRE. and they have some data that is showing significant progress and changes as part of this process. So that might be something that you want to think about with your priorities. Carol Anderson has been with the state office for a long time. I want to say about 12 years. She is our behavior specialist, and she focuses on school-based mental health and positive behavior interventions and supports, and supported the work of the least restrictive behavior intervention manual applying for all students instead of just students with disabilities. Crystal Thomas is relatively new in about the last year to the state office, and she supports related service providers and students with sensory impairments, so students who are deaf-blind, and does a lot of work with USDB. Dawn Binky, it's spelled B-E-N-K. I always it's Binky though, is relatively new. She replaced Christine Timothy when she retired and is over the Carson Smith Scholarship, the Paraeducator Scholarship, and has now accepted new responsibilities on technical assistance and professional development for paraeducators. There's some work that we're doing that's new around paraeducators. One is we received from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania gave us for free all of their developed online professional development for paraeducators working with students with disabilities. We have to have a contract with the online platform to be able to put it in place, and so we're going through that process. We are also revising the paraeducator manual that has been out for about 6-7 years, and changing it from a paraeducator manual for working with students with disabilities to a paraeducator manual working with all students, and bringing in other departments to look at the instructional strategies and how to work with English learners and other types of students. So really scaling up that work and taking it further, similar to what we did with the least restrictive behavior interventions manual. So Dawn is responsible for that. Ginny Egan retires tomorrow. And she has been with us. She had transferred over when the Personnel Development Center, the UPDC, closed, had transferred over as a temporary employee with us to support the Utah Multi-Tiered System of Supports, UMTSS project. So she is leaving, and we have 1 year left of that federal project, and we actually have a great person that we don't have her picture, but Ellie Young, who's coming from BYU, is going to be with us for a year to finish out that contract, and is on sabbatical at BYU and will be working with us. So we're very excited about that, because then when the project's over, she can take that knowledge back to BYU and their teacher ed program. This is Jessica Bowman, and Jessica is relatively new also in about the last year. She works with students with autism and significant cognitive disabilities. How many of you met Jessica? Okay. She's doing a ton of work, doing some virtual community of practices. Jessica is pregnant with her third child. She has twin girls that are 3, 4, and will be taking maternity leave in around October. So we'll see her kind of hit and miss. Lindsay Adams has been with us for about a year, and she replaced Tiffany Owens when she left and does our UPIPS monitoring and results-driven accountability process. Natay Dearden is our dispute resolution coordinator. So looking at facilitations, mediation, state complaints, and due process hearings, managing that system, and she will also be taking on the parent survey results that we see, because Ginny was doing that responsibility. And then Patsy Milligan is, I think, our newest member, and we borrowed her. Kathy probably uses a different word, from Davis School District when Jennifer left, and Patsy does data and finance for us, and did quite a bit for.
Just look at it as I have an end now.
Yes. So she's with us. Susan Loving, many of you know, has been at the state office for about 14 years and is the school to post-school transition specialist. At some point, we're going to have a pending retirement because she has identified my strategy, which is every time she talks to me about retirement, I find a new project that she gets excited about. So on Monday, we have discussed working with the higher ed and with teaching and learning to address and promote some strengths around concurrent enrollment for students with disabilities in colleges and really strengthening recruitment of students with disabilities for College Week when they do the trainings and promote applying to college. So she's pretty excited again. So I'm hopeful that I'm going to get another few years. But she did go, wait a minute. I see this strategy. This is Tracy. Give me Tracy's last name. Gooley. Thank you. I can never remember that. And Tracy is our assessment specialist. So working with SAGE and DLM, assessment accommodations. You remember Paul originally had that position and then he transitioned over to the MTSS. And Tracy came on to assist with that. Paul's last day is tomorrow. Paul has taken a position as a assistant principal for American Leadership Academy, which is 3 miles from his home. He has been commuting 20 hours a week from Salem to the USOE over the past 3 years that he's been here, which is a pretty significant time investment. So we're sad to lose him, but we're very excited that he's going to be so close to home and recoup some time there. So we've had a lot of changes, a lot of personnel changes. One of the things that the feedback that we got from LEAs is that these changes have been hard on them, right? Getting people and building the capacity and the knowledge of people to provide these supports. And we understand that. They're hard on us, too. So I recently did a survey to LEAs and members of the staff asking how is the TA that you're getting, is it aligned with IDEA? Some results from that. We had 64 LEAs respond out of 140. All of them who had received TA from us, except one, said that the TA was quality and aligned. We had one person say they got information that was not correct. We don't know who because of the nature of the survey. We asked for ideas on things that needed to improve. And one of the recommendations that I think is very timely is that there should be some incentives for people who work at the state level to keep them. And I completely agree with that. I mean, that is something that the state office has struggled with historically forever. Special ed, up until this last year or so, was pretty good at keeping our personnel. And we've had, I think, in just the last year, rapid turnover that is difficult. 2 people who had been with the state office for multiple years left to form their own private company. And I don't think can be faulted for that. We have people who have switched jobs within the department, and I always think that that's positive, right? Because it builds capacity and allows people to continue to grow and learn. So that's something that I've always supported. And then we'll probably have another change with the retirement of Rebecca and any other staff that wish to retire, but the ending of the UMTSS grant, right, and the transition to if we get another grant. So that is something that I think we do need to take into consideration are those changes. You guys, I think, are all aware that we have a new superintendent. So Dr. Sydney Dixon, as of last week, I think it's been a week, right, now has been the state superintendent. And we're not quite sure internally what will happen. anytime there's a new superintendent, they have the opportunity to make changes with staff. And so we're waiting to see what changes might come out of that with leadership and directors. And then we have had the voc rehab department move out. I don't know if any of you have walked by the giant empty space, and we know that there'll be some shuffling of offices and space, and we don't know how that will play out. With voc rehab leaving, there has been a transition of funding that had previously came here that is now going to workforce services. And so that has impacted some of the budgets here at the state office. Not ours, because we haven't received any funds from voc rehab, but there are other departments that's impacted. And so there's kind of a shuffling right now of responsibilities and assignments and space, and we're looking to see how all of that plays out. Any questions about any of that? Kathy?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I just want to thank Glenna. When you have a turnover of staff like that, because I've experienced that, all my top supervisors are brand new in the last 2 years. And it takes a great deal of time and effort to bring those new people on and to make sure they have the resources they need and gain the knowledge they need to do their job. So I just want to thank Glenna for working so well with all of our new people to make sure that they're addressing the needs for students with disabilities.
Thank you. Well, and it's always helpful, but I know what's not working too, so that we can try to shore it up. But I do feel good. I think we have strong people, and I envision that those that are new will improve, right? They'll learn the job and they'll improve. This isn't a job you can walk into knowing how to do. It's something you have to learn kind of trial by fire. So.
You can relate this to Jessica Bone. I've been really impressed with the virtual community of practice that she's been doing for students, for the teachers and students with significant cognitive disabilities. I attended a lot of those with my students in the background because my students were still there. But I've been really impressed with the level of training and professional development that she was providing for those. I really helped with administering the DLM.
Great, thank you. I will pass that on. She will appreciate it. So, with that, I'm sorry I went into your lunch slightly.
That's okay. Although it smells really good, so hard. Well, how do you want to do that since it's going to be a working lunch? Do you want to take 10 minutes for people to be able to get their lunch and then continue?
I'm actually done.
Oh, you're done? Oh, well, there you have it.
I was going to bring up the rule, though, for Karen very much. So.
Okay.
One quick question. I don't know you're going to mention it later, but now that SAGE is actually not going to happen, right?
It's still there. It was kind of an if-then statement that the board said. So they kind of said if the legislature does this, then we will remove SAGE for this grade level, looking at kind of that 10th grade. Yeah. So we're still in a waiting pattern around SAGE. So SAGE is still there. And then ESSA, we're forming work groups to look at those. So we just kind of have a lot of things that are just starting, right, that we aren't quite sure how they're going to play out. And I think we'll know most of those in September. So I'm going to add ESSA to the list for...
Will that also affect DLM?
Yes. So DLM will mimic whatever SAGE does. One thing that we have made a decision on, and I don't think anybody knows this yet. I don't think we've sent it out. So you may actually know this first, is next year we are going to an end of year only DLM, not the intermittent. And the reason is because the reason we went with the inner year multiple times was that it was supposed to provide us data and information for instruction, and that did not occur. And so
Yes.
Actually, I was able to get data and use it for instruction.
Good.
I actually administered it 3 times during the inner time.
Perfect. So,
but I don't know what proficiency was.
Right.
I just
So,
know what progress my students had.
Yeah. So until we identify what's going to happen with Sage, there's going to be possibly a new vendor for Sage. We address some concerns with DLM. It'll mimic Sage. It'll be end of year only. And actually what I think we may do is look at an assessment that is both for all students and it is an alternate altogether, because we also need to develop an alternate for the new science standards. So again, period of great change.
So have they ever determined what determines proficiency on the DLM?
Yes.
Yeah, because as recently as April, our assessment director said that they hadn't.
Let me ask Jessica for the information for you, but I've seen proficiency rates, so there must be something.
When parents would ask me, I said, well, I don't know, but here's what your child's able to do. And I've been able to show the progress that their individual child made, but couldn't determine.
Right, which was the intent behind it. So, yeah. It's the dynamic learning maps, and it's the alternate assessment for SAGE. So up to 1% of the population, students who have significant cognitive impairments, can work on alternate achievement standards, which are called the essential elements. And then they take a different test. So thank you for asking. Okay, so if you guys have more questions, let me know, but I'm going to let you eat instead of just smelling it. So.
Do you want to give them maybe 10 minutes to get food and then you can go over that rule?
Yep.
Okay. So why don't we go and get some food and then we'll have a brief discussion. So we'll come back at 12:15 and talk, but go get food. Okay, let's go ahead and come back together.
Oh, thank you, dear. I'm going to miss everybody.
Okay, Maggie asked me to go over the rule that Karen Condor asked about. And so I'm just quickly going to go over, this is a new rule that the board voted on in June. And so it goes into effect in August 8th. It's called the Academic Pathway to Teaching, the APT. And basically what this talks about is another alternative route to becoming a teacher. We don't have a ton of information because it's new. So there'll be more information coming out. But basically, you can get a level 1 license with elementary or secondary concentration, and special education has been included in the overall conversation, but we haven't identified, since special ed is K-12, how that impacts us yet. So that's kind of the unknown. But you do an application. You have to have a bachelor's degree or higher in the subject matter. So math, science, special ed. You have to take a praxis assessment, and then you have to do the ethics evaluation that those of us that are teachers, every time we're relicensed, we have to take an ethics evaluation. You have to go through a background check and then pay the fee. So what this means is you wouldn't necessarily have to go through a teacher ed program and student teach. So you could come into education this way. Here's the secondary. You can see same requirements, application, bachelor's degree. You have to submit your post-secondary transcripts to the superintendent, and you have to receive a passing score on an assessment that aligns to what you're wanting to teach. Either praxis, another board-approved content knowledge assessment, then you have to do the ethics review, pass a background check, and pay the fee. So it requires a master teacher to serve as a mentor. So LEAs have to put some processes in place to support these people. And you have to provide support for them to learn the teacher standards, the educator standards. And then within 3 years, they have to get their level 2 license. So you can see they have to teach at least part-time or full-time. There's some different lengths of time there. And then you have to do the those of you the early years enhancement, the EYE, that all teachers have to do, and then anything else that your LEA thinks that you need to support. So this just provides a pathway other than traditional teacher prep going through a university in teaching. So hasn't gone into effect yet. Don't know much about it. Mallory.
My microphone doesn't work. I'll just ask loudly. So this would not be a way for teachers to be highly qualified in a secondary way, such as like math, science, or language arts?
Generally, no. And there's some language in here that says that. Okay. Let's see. I'll have to find it, but I've seen that. Tanya, did you have a question?
So I was just wondering, from someone outside education, how feasible does this seem? Like, is this going to be used frequently? I mean, I just need to get a sense.
You know, I think that it's feasible. For someone who has subject matter knowledge, someone who's been through and has a biology degree and wants to teach biology, they're going to be able to pass a subject matter assessment. I think it's going to hinge on the support they get at the LEA level for the actual instruction, right? Like putting that into practice in a classroom. I think some people will be successful, some people won't. I think a lot of it's going to depend on the economy too. Do you remember when we had the slump in the economy? A lot of people came out of private enterprise and wanted to be teachers and went through alternative routes to that. And then now that the economy is picking back up, we're kind of losing people again. But I think it gives people an opportunity who really want to work in public education, an opportunity to try that. And the board is looking very specifically at how to transform licensure to meet the needs of students. So we'll see.
Lana, have they said anything about how they're going to do that master teacher? I mean, they could conceivably hire somebody who's not teaching other classes and say, you're the mentor teacher for everybody at these 2 or 3 schools, and do that.
Right. I have not seen that because it hasn't gone into effect yet, so they're still kind of looking at it and trying to decide. Historically, they tend to not hire people to support. Again, when the change in the economy, those positions were the first to go. The people who were supporting brand new teachers. So it just depends. I don't know. Yes.
I think this opens up great possibilities, though, in the rural area, because we often have teacher positions that cannot be filled. There's just no one who applies who's qualified. And so that gives some options for getting someone who loves the material into a classroom and can excite students, where if they have no one, that's even worse.
So, yeah, I think there's pros and cons, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. Okay, so just really quickly, I had alluded to some work that Betsy Sutherland was doing around preschool, the RP2. And so do you mind if I just give her a minute to talk about that before we move on? Okay. Betsy, if you could just turn on a mic.
Okay, is that one working? Yes. So RP2, Glenna said she gave you a minute on that, but she said, but I can't remember what RP2 stands for. So RP2 stands for Reaching Potential Through the Recommended Practices. So the recommended practices are early childhood, the Division for Early Childhood through CEC. Put out a list of 70 recommended practices for that are best practices for children 3 to 5. So they use that as a basis. We are actually looking at the ones that are about student engagement, and family engagement and inclusive practices. And the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center is providing us support. They come and do training with us. We had someone here yesterday who was facilitating and advising our state leadership team on how to implement this. We hope to have it statewide. Eventually, we have 5 years funding and are looking at a 5-year project to make sure that best practices are used in preschool and to promote inclusive environments in all our preschools across the state. So, and next year, you know, almost every district will have some level of inclusive environments available in their school district. There's only a couple now that don't. So we've really made a lot of progress with inclusive environments over the last couple of years. So that's really moving along. The districts that are in RP2 now, we're doing 4 or 5 per year. We're adding on each year. The 4 that did it this year loved it. They're seeing a lot of really good outcomes for kids as a result of this and improving teaching strategies from their teachers. So it's been very successful the first year. We're adding 5 new districts next year and hope to add about 5 every year. And so we have everything in place to make this work over the next 5 years. So it's very exciting, and it's being very successful. So it's great. Any questions about it?
Who remembers what RP2 stands for?
Almost. So it's RP twice, reaching potential through recommended practices. RP2.
Okay, now I remember.
And it's you know, the ECTA project, because the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center it's their project. And that is the long version, is the reaching potential through recommended practices, and of course it's special ed. So we had to come up with an acronym, right? Yeah, you can't have a program without an acronym. It's not allowed. So yes, it so is. So, any questions about it? Okay. Oh, can I do one more thing? In the morning, I was in a meeting about Senate Bill 101, which provided $7 million to preschools to expand their preschools to kids at risk. So that's where I was this morning. That actually will help inclusive environments a lot. So the districts that were evaluated and found to be high quality preschools will be opening more preschools for hundreds of kids around the state, 4-year-olds, so that are at risk. So that will open up more preschools to allow us to include more children with disabilities in those preschools. So that's...
Which bill was that?
Senate Bill 101. So thank your legislators for passing Senate Bill 101, and we want more. Yeah, keep going.
I just want to point out, I've given you a copy of the data. So the first 2 pages are the most current data that we submitted for the APR, and the last 2 pages are the year prior, so you can compare. So they're coming around that side. Do you mind, I know you're going to go into your priorities discussion, do you mind if I just run upstairs and have a 5-minute meeting with my staff? Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is establish what our priorities are going to be for the coming meetings. Keeping in mind what John spoke about this morning of what our function is as a panel, making sure that we are addressing unmet needs for students with disabilities. So what I'd like you to do is just go to the sheet that talks about our previous priority or focus topics. So we've spent time looking at transition on a number of different occasions over the last 5 years, as well as inclusion. Last year we focused on assistive technology, transition, and effective instruction, at looking specifically, well, not necessarily specifically, but looking at math and English language arts as well. So given what we've heard as far as the data that's are coming out, we need to start figuring out what kinds of priority topics. Now, in the past, what we've done, I know that we've put priority topics on pieces of paper, and then people can vote, and we sort of determine that way. Last year, it ended up not looking that way. Instead, it was sort of a consensus around several topics that sort of coalesced into the 4 topics that we wanted to talk about, or 3 topics. I'm fine either way. Being the perpetual teacher, I brought my giant notepad, even though I knew Rebecca would probably have it too. Can't help but, always be prepared. I've got a giant notepad at my house all the time because I'm also a Girl Scout leader, and you can always use giant notepads. Come on, of course you can. So, maybe let's start with just brainstorming some ideas about topics that people feel would be appropriate for this panel to provide input or find more information about, so that we could act as our advisory panel. So people have ideas. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I don't know how to say it, but we have post-secondary opportunities. Have a range of that. Like, I know there's I've seen a lot of good that for people that are lower functioning, but maybe for higher functioning people on the autism spectrum, there's not a lot out there. And I know from personal experience that I've known some people that have tried to go that route, but then it didn't meet their needs. And since one child he went through as a student, he came back the next year, and he had there were some people that didn't want him to do that. Some of the district people and stuff. But providing options that are going to meet the needs of those students the best, or maybe specifically for higher functioning students.
Okay. Other ideas?
I would agree with that one, that there's a reason transition is on here so much. There are some huge gaps, and for the high schools, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because you want to support those kids all the way until they're a senior and they can graduate. But that also then is detrimental when they step outside of that zone, because the support system can't possibly be what it has been in the high school. And so if there's not preparation to help those kids to be more independent, they're just falling through the cracks. And so I think if we could work on something and help fill in that gap, that would be great.
Okay. Other ideas?
If I can add to that too, maybe. Thank you.
Now it's on.
Good. Maybe a place to really focus in on being able to provide some structure behind identifying those supports is really focusing in on transition plans, and knowing that those are starting potentially for students who are at 14. I think that strengthening the understanding for schools, and also working with the outside agencies, the state agencies. So really kind of taking the focus for transition a lot smaller, a lot narrower. The other thought I had was same thing, transition, but specifically with the graduation. And then the potential with what Glenna had mentioned is maybe we'll get the approval to extend out the cohorts for graduation, because I know specifically with our school, our graduation rates look terrible, but yet I have 49 students who are extending their graduation next year. So.
Okay. Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
I think to go along with this, we're looking at post-high school outcomes, and we're looking backwards. I think the topic you mentioned earlier about collaboration between general ed and special ed, I think it goes back to, are we making sure that our students have appropriate access to general education and the general ed curriculum? Because if they're going to go on to some of those, whether it's technical college or university, whether it's one of the programs like Aggie's Elevated or for a 4-year degree, we need to be making sure that those students have access to that environment so that when they get to that point, they know what's required in that environment. So that we're not just thinking about it in high school, but we're thinking about it probably in elementary school.
Absolutely. Other ideas?
So maybe somebody that took better notes while Glenna was talking than I did. She hit on several key things that she mentioned that she thought we might want to consider as our focus topics for this year. And secondly, at the end of the year last year, we did talk about effective instruction, but then motioned that we would have a continual conversation about that because we got the basics, but I thought we didn't get to what we wanted, which was how are we teaching our gen ed teachers to give effective instruction for the special ed population?
Yeah, and I agree that was, I think that goes back to Kathy's idea of talking about collaboration between gen ed and special ed. We need to maybe have some more input about how we're training, whether it's professional development training or whether it's teacher prep, to talk about how we're prepping gen ed teachers, because obviously we have a vested interest in how they are being prepared to work with kids with disabilities. As far as taking notes, I did take notes. Not that they're even legible to anybody other than me, but I did take notes. One of the things she was talking about was math. And I think this goes back to this idea of collaborating between gen ed and special education, because one of the issues was making sure that students have access to the math core curriculum. Well, if we don't have effective collaboration between gen ed and special education, that's going to be substantially more difficult for students. Another one was youth in custody, which I'll be perfectly honest with you is not even one that even showed up on my radar, but clearly it's something, if we talk about, issues of kids with disabilities, there's a high percentage of kids with disabilities in custody.
And it's very of much interest to me personally.
Oh, so. No, I'm sure it is. So that's actually something that I'm very intrigued by, because I think that it's, at least from my perspective as a former special education classroom teacher and then as faculty, it's just not something we discuss all that often. And so I think that I would be very interested in having that as a focus, just because for no other reason than I think that getting more information out there as far as what's going on, what's even available, I think is important. Yeah.
I agree. I've sat on different committees in our district as students in custody transition in, and our desire is always to put them or place them in the most appropriate setting, but oftentimes we don't have, as a district, the information that we need from the caseworkers. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to hold kids out.
Sure.
We want to get them in school as soon as possible, but I don't want to put a student in school and then change them 2 weeks later or a month later. So I think there's an issue of sharing of information, so that we can make sure it's the most appropriate placement of location for a student.
And I just want to piggyback on that, because we find that as well, that communication with transferring them back into the classroom setting, and then also having that with the police officers and them understanding how to work with them, and if they get called to the school or something happens, how to work with them. So I agree.
It's really hard when these kids move around so much. Some of them, the records don't follow very well, and so that's another challenge we have, and I know that's a challenge that caseworkers have, is how do we get those records,
right?
So that we know that it's.
And so for the last 8 years, I've been involved in the Youth in Custody Advisory Panel, which is the counterpart for this committee for youth in custody, and would be very happy to set up something, get the right people here to educate you as to what's going on. I think what's really important for you about these specific students, number one, they're not talked about frequently enough, and number two, they're the very top part of the pyramid, right? And so we need to address that, because oftentimes they're pretty ignored. So, and then the middle part of the pyramid, those kids that are walking that line, right? That are, you know, not in custody yet, but they're on the brink of going there. And I think that there are some initiatives that we have at the Department of Human Services right now going on to help with those things, but we definitely need to figure out how to collaborate better with education around these issues. So I'm very passionate about that particular issue, and that's where my vote would go.
I think it's interesting. So, oh, sure.
I've been over here just so you're aware of this. Our responsibility as an agency is to seek out the highest and most vulnerable population, and that is the highest and most vulnerable. The statistics are not good for the state. 2012 is the only one I've been able to find, and youth who are in state custody, and we're talking not just juvenile justice, but also kids who are DCFS, only about 23% are identified as students with disabilities. That's well below the national average, which to me suggests it's something we as a committee definitely need to look at. On a different note, in terms of the transition and so forth and the dropout rates, I think that's also something that's very key for us to look at, because only an hour ago, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act regulations came out, which is all about kids in transition having, oh, is that a word? Needing to be required to be tested or evaluated by vocational rehabilitation, and Amy's gone, so she can't speak to this. She's on a call about the Workforce Innovation Act, but there's now requirements on schools to work with VR to get them evaluated before we can go to day treatment programs or sheltered workshops. So something else to think about.
Okay, excellent. Jill, did you?
Well, I was just going to, about the youth. About youth in custody during John's presentation, that was one of the issues that was a federal issue too. And if it's a federal, we should be addressing it sooner rather than later.
Sure, absolutely. Be ahead of the curve on it. Well, and I think, again, if you go back to what our function is as a panel, unmet needs, this sounds like it's, this is textbook unmet need. You couldn't get more unmet than that. I guess you could, but... and then the other priority that had been discussed was instruction and this idea of least restrictive environment in preschool, which it sounds like we're working on, which is great. Are there other ideas people have? Yeah, Karen.
Also, I was thinking that we should focus, or it'd be good if we focused on improving expectations for kids with special needs. And I wonder if there might be a better way to say that, because when you say improving expectations, it sounds like, come on, you need to do better, step up to this. I think what it means is people should be aware that just because somebody has a special need, they can accomplish things. And so, and that might be improving the expectations might be with the student themselves or with regular ed teachers, special ed teachers, parents, with everybody, to just maybe make that a more visible issue so people understand that, oh, just because somebody has a disability doesn't mean they can't do anything.
Sure, absolutely. Which could, again, be tied to this idea of collaborating between general education and special education. Good point. Other ideas?
The other idea that I had with, looking at this data here was focusing on the percentage of participation in the assessment. I realize that, we have the parent opt-out. I use the parent opt-out with my son because, I didn't want teacher evaluations to be tied to somebody who just goes and marks because he doesn't care and stuff. And using a parent opt-out didn't impact the teacher evaluations and stuff. But it's impacting the percent, it's made us a 1 instead of a 2 on the state. And so I don't know, maybe there's something that we need to look at is at the participation. Is how much of this participation is because of parent opt-out and how much of it because they weren't enrolled in the right math classes or right English language arts classes. So what's impacting it the most? Okay, if it's a parent opt-out, there's really not much we can do. But if it's because they're not enrolled in the right courses, that's something that can be addressed.
Other ideas?
This is probably more advocacy than advice, but early intervention, or not intervention, but early, what's the word, recognition of issues. I think that this can go clear back first, second grade, when they're learning to read, as they're not learning to read, that can lead to eventual problems down the road. And I think about the whole youth in custody, and those kids have nowhere else to go if they don't know how to read. So that's kind of my advocacy.
Sure. No, that's sort of that pipeline idea. No, I think that's fact is what that is. What I'm seeing, and this may just be my interpretation, so feel free to jump in, is it's sort of coalescing around three main ideas, and some of these things are sort of branching off on this. But one is looking at this idea of transition, focusing not only on what the post-secondary opportunities are for students, and I think it would be interesting to not only see what we're doing before they start to transition, but also what are their options available to them once they transition. So people talked about things like Aggie's Elevated and things like that, but what are the other options that are available, and perhaps bringing in outside agencies to talk about what those different options are. That would then relate to this idea of graduation rates, cohorts, things like that. The next one would be this idea of collaboration and access to general education, making sure that gen ed and special ed are talking to one another. So we are identifying students so that we're trying to figure out why kids are or not participating in assessments, if it's an issue of not being able to access the content because of a failure to communicate. And then the third one that I'm seeing was youth in custody. Are people okay with these three as topics? If not, please feel free to jump in, or if there are aspects of it that you want to add to.
I was going to say, maybe we ought to look at, for the second topic, those multi-tiered systems of support as well. Could be possibly part of the issue of keeping kids in a least restricted environment. If they're getting the appropriate aids and services they need to stay there. And, I think it encompasses more than special ed, because we don't want to identify kids that don't need to be identified. And so if we can do that early piece and get those systems of support in place, and I know as directors have talked about different topics, one of the things we always go back to is what are those systems, support systems that are in place to help all students.
And Maggie, we have 4 meetings, right? Correct?
We have 3 meetings after this.
We haven't identified them yet, but we can have 3 or 4. We can have an additional meeting if there appears to be a need.
Sure. So I was going to say, because I know usually we have the meeting during the summer, so this meeting, and then we have 3 more meetings over the course of the year. In the past, if you look at the topics, we have had more than 3 topics in the past. So, and we could have more if we want.
Yeah, one thing is that when we tend to have more than 3 topics, things get lost and spread out. Yeah. And I hate to suggest it, but I'm also very, very interested in the early intervention stuff. The reason is because I'm very interested in this idea that we need to do more preventative work up front, right? From preventing and helping at the early stages before things rise to a level where we can't intervene or where it's harder to intervene, right? So very interested in learning about that in early intervention work, probably for selfish reasons in my own work too. But so I don't want to suggest a fourth meeting, but I guess that's what I'm. All early intervention services, yeah. Very interested in learning about that. I don't want to suggest a fourth meeting, but I guess that's what I'm suggesting as a fourth meeting. So.
Well, I think that what we need to look at is what our role is as far as providing input to Glenna. And I'm not saying, well, we've already got someone who's working on early intervention, so we don't need to provide. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that looking at these different topics, we need to start thinking about what kind of input would we be providing to as an advisory panel. I think early intervention, but I think also early identification goes back to what Catherine was saying. So I think that those things sort of work in concert with one another. Not only are we identifying kids younger, but also once they're in the system, are we trying to mitigate problems quicker or more quickly? Quicker? Whatever. I know. Words. I've got all the good words. So if we wanted to have a fourth meeting, that would be fine. I think obviously we need to wait for Glenna to come back so that we can actually schedule these meetings. So we're actually moving a lot faster than I think anyone anticipated, but it's the power of all this working together. Perfect timing.
I have a thought about that.
Sure.
About the early intervention or early systems of support, I think is kind of what I'm thinking, that with all three of those topics, children are affected throughout the lifespan. Mm-hmm. And so if on all three of the topics we heard about what was happening in the early part of children's lives, then that would kind of integrate those ideas into the other priority areas that we're talking about. Because what happens with children when they're very young impacts those other three areas so dramatically.
Absolutely. So yes, Glenna, to sort of update you, what we're looking at is issues with transition, post-secondary opportunities. So not only looking at what we're doing on the front end with transition, especially now that transition sounds like it's moving earlier, which is a good thing, but also looking at what opportunities are once students leave the school system. So there's been discussion about the post-secondary opportunities that are available for students with more significant disabilities, but what sort of opportunities and supports are there for students with more mild disabilities or who are higher functioning? And in addition to that, talking about how could that potentially help with graduation and this idea of extending cohorts, which was already sort of brought up as an issue. Our second one would be sort of piggybacking off of what we had sort of not tabled, but needed extended discussion about this idea of collaboration between general education and special education and how MTSS and things like that come into play with that to better meet the needs of students, especially given the fact that we have the data that showed that we've got some issues with students taking assessments in different grade levels, which of course I can't find right now. But is it possible that one of the reasons that they're not taking it is either the opt-out or is it because they're not actually accessing? So that would go back to this idea of making sure that gen ed and special ed are actually communicating with one another, and how are we preparing special education teachers and general education teachers to both collaborate and to have gen ed teachers working with kids with disabilities. And then the last one, because it was brought up in the previous discussion, was this idea of youth in custody, just because that's just an area that obviously is a hugely unmet need, and it's one that looks like it's going to be a priority area nationwide, and we really just don't really have as much information about it, but think that that would be a place where we could provide some input.
You know, I am actually very impressed with your suggestions. I think you guys have hit it exactly in our areas of need. Did I miss, I just see it in Rebecca's notes, and I may have missed you saying it, but early intervention.
So we were talking about early intervention. There was a discussion about potentially having a fourth meeting. to talk about early intervention, or integrating this idea of early intervention, not just early intervention for younger students, but this idea of early identification and early support. So, looking at tier 2 kinds of things in MTSS across these different things. How can early intervening affect post-secondary opportunities for kids who are transitioning? How can early intervening talk about getting kids more access to gen ed curriculum, and how could early intervention potentially impact students who are youth in custody? Okay. So sort of putting that across.
Okay.
And so I clarified early intervention is 0 to 5 is what they're,
okay.
So
I'm going to, I just have a suggestion to make with that if you're going to look at early intervention, early intervening, and getting supports in place before they're actually needed, then you may also want to look at coordinated early intervening services, which is CEIS, which allows up to 15% of IDA funds to be used to support students who are at risk of having a disability and not identified yet. So that might be something, if you're going to want to examine that relationship across, that I would probably add.
Okay. Anything else? People okay with these as priority areas? Okay, so then I guess the question is figuring out when we're going to meet, and if we feel it necessary to have more than what we've done in the past as far as 3 meetings, doing 4 meetings instead. Which I'm fine with either. So, Rebecca, remind me when we generally have had our meetings in the past.
There's been one sometime in the fall, around October,
okay,
somewhere in there. Sometimes it goes to December, but that's usually if we have one earlier, like in September maybe.
Okay.
And then there's usually one after the beginning of the year, after the Christmas break and all of that. And then there's one around April.
Okay. All right. Just trying to think of ways that we could spread out 4 meetings if we wanted to, especially in light of the fact that some of the data we're not going to get until after September, correct? Or rules won't be in place until after September? Okay. Anyone have input on, or I can just set your schedule if you want me to, but usually people don't like that.
October, like maybe the beginning of October might be a nice time.
Well, I'm just saying we could keep it as the October sort of January, February, and then in April. I'm just trying to figure out a way if we wanted to squeeze a 4th meeting in where we're going to put that.
Beginning of December.
Okay. And then push the January, February to more of a February.
Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody comfortable with 4 meetings? Excellent. And that will give us some time in case we potentially move faster on one but move slower on the other. The youth in custody one, I think, just because there's such a dearth of information that we have as a panel, I think is going to take a lot more time to get up to speed, so it might be nice to have a little wiggle room, have an extra meeting.
Are you wanting to change the format of the meetings? So for the last few years, we've kind of covered one topic a meeting. And are you thinking that maybe you want to cover in some way, knowing some would be more in depth and stuff, like all 4 each meeting?
No, I think we do. I would feel more comfortable doing one topic per meeting. I'm afraid if we try and do all topics at one meeting, it's just going to get kind of to be too much, which is why we wanted to add a 4th meeting so we could do post-secondary and transition, collaboration, access to gen ed, youth in custody, and this idea of preventative, early identification, early intervention kinds of things. So then that would be the topics for the 4 different meetings.
Order that you'd like to do them?
But I do think there is some advantage to having some crossover, because if we have the opportunity to discuss something and then talk more about it 2 months later, we may actually be able to fill in the gaps better, especially with the youth in custody. That's a lot of varying situations, and yet all of the topics we're addressing will apply to that group. And so talking a little bit about them each time may be more productive for this panel over the long term.
And perhaps maybe not trying to tackle all 4 of them at every one, but maybe devoting specific time over the course of the agenda of making those connections. So saying, okay, there's going to be an agenda item talking about making the connections between the different things. How does this impact this group? Given what we've already heard, how does this impact that? Okay, I'm fine with having that be sort of a standing agenda item.
Can I just suggest one thing? Mm-hmm. I wonder if we have like 2 topics, like Tanya was saying, she has youth in custody come talk to us, give us some of the background knowledge, give us that, and then another topic, give us some background knowledge and some things that we want to go out and look for or do, and then come back with those 2 topics and kind of really focus on them and put those in place, and then do the next 2 kind of like that. But I like the crossover thing, but I'm wondering if 4 every time might be a little much. I don't know, just a suggestion with that.
Yeah, which is why I'm saying that instead of trying to tackle all 4 of them at once, maybe just have it be a standing, we have, after we've got some information in the afternoon, one of the things that we always talk about is how these things connect. Because I think it might be difficult, depending on which order we decide to put things in, to start making connections if we don't have as much information about a certain topic yet. So, okay, so as far as putting things in a specific order, do people have a feeling about what they would like to see first? I mean, we could look at it from we start with early intervening, and then we slowly, hopefully, are preventing our way of getting all the way to youth in custody. Or we could look at the topics that seem to be maybe the ones that are going to require the most information at the outset. Because I'm fine with either. Glenna, do you have any thoughts on how to arrange these?
So I've had it for a couple times and I keep changing my mind. So I'm going to just give you a whole bunch of information and you guys can work through it with me. So looking at this, some work could be done on all of them in October. The post-secondary opportunities, and I mean, that's a work in progress. It's something we've been working on for a while. That would be a nice one to put right at the beginning of the year. It would tie in and support the work with concurrent enrollment and College Week, which is right at the front end. On the other hand, it's right at the front end, and we don't have a ton of information. We have post-secondary outcome data, things like that. The graduation cohort, we have some opportunities to change that with the ESSA. And again, we're right on the front end, right? So a good time to make changes, not time to get a ton of TA or information before you recommend changes. The grade level and general ed, special ed, communication, collaboration, looking at teacher prep programs, that's work that's ongoing throughout. So I think you could put that pretty much anywhere. And it would be beneficial. And then Travis Cook just joined us, and he is over youth in custody. And I just sent him an email. So, Travis, what you don't know is that this panel, the state special ed panel, has identified youth in custody as one of their priority areas over the next year. And so we would want you to be part of that, and they're going to pick a date that they're going to focus on that. And so, again, we're right at the front end, right? Some preliminary data, not a lot of time to take action or to get TA, but important work. So what I've been able to identify now that I've verbalized all of that to you is that all 4 of them are extremely important. And all 4 of them have an opportunity to make large-scale change if the earlier you do it. And 3 of them won't have a ton of information available at the same time that you'll have the greatest impact on change. Does that make sense? So that's the part I'm struggling with. Yes. So, but Travis, I'm hoping that if you have a minute, you can hang out while they pick a date that they're going to focus on YSC so we can make sure it works for you. Okay.
Okay, so I think we've muddied the water a little more. No, you're fine. You're fine. Because now I feel like, well, we should just randomly assign them. Does anybody have any strong feelings about what we should discuss first?
Well, I'm thinking we should discuss youth in custody first, because we've all agreed that that is an area that's got a huge unmet need. And if, we've focused on transition quite a bit. I mean, yes, there's still need we still have needs in it, but we've been focusing on it, but we've never focused on youth in custody. And so that is, of all of the areas, that's the area I feel has the biggest unmet need. And so that's what I think needs to be first.
Well, and what's nice about doing that is then we can start looking at these other topics, having that as a background sort of framework of, how could this impact youth in custody? How could this, okay. All right, so October meeting, youth in custody. Yeah, I was going to say clear your October. Cause...
Do you mind if we pick a date?
No, that's fine. That's what we were waiting for, picking dates until you were here.
Is there a day of the week that we're looking at? It used to be Tuesdays or Thursdays, right? I don't remember.
It's usually been Tuesdays or Thursdays, yeah.
So, what day of the week does not work for people generally?
Tuesdays are hard.
Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Mondays.
And Thursdays because I teach, but I can make that work. I can rearrange my teaching.
Is Friday a better day for people than Thursdays?
I was going to say,
yeah. You want me to look at Thursdays in October?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and UEA is.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, UEA.
Also, what about a Monday?
Are Mondays terrible for people?
Not for me, but.
No, Mondays are fine.
I'm hearing Mondays now.
Yeah, Monday.
Okay, I am available right now. I could do the 20th or the 27th.
Is UEA.
The 20th is UEA.
Yeah.
Okay, the 27th.
That would be fine.
Okay. Travis, October 27th.
Sold. Okay.
Okay, and we generally book from 9 to
3. Mm-hmm.
And I'll just stay here with the guys who cancel. And if we're able to come, just because I'm new, and I do have a meeting that afternoon that I just have to leave a little early for, is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah. Oh, that's fine.
It's almost impossible to get everybody, so.
No. We do what we can. So, yeah, so October 27th will be our first meeting.
Okay. Travis, thank you very much.
Hey, June, do you need me for anything else?
I'll give you more info later.
Awesome.
Thanks. Okay, so then December meeting. Are there dates that work better for you?
Yep. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm getting the people invited who need to be here. Okay. I could do December 15th or the 22nd. Knowing that the 22nd is going to be difficult.
We'll go. I was going to say the 15th, I think, would be better.
Okay. December 15th.
Okay, and then
Which topic?
That's what our next question is. What topic do we want to start with? Early intervening, early identification topic? Or do we want to talk about?
I was going to build the early intervening one into all of them.
Yeah, how about the general education and special education teachers collaborating?
Okay.
Which also hits preschool.
Sure. Okay, so then the December 15th meeting, we'll be talking about gen ed special ed collaboration.
And with that would also include the participation rates on the assessments? Is that because we wanted to figure out what's impacting the participation, whether it's not enrolling?
Yeah, we could incorporate that too. Okay. Then we would need a February meeting.
The 16th looks good and the 23rd looks good.
The 16th. There's not anywhere one. Oh, no, that would be President's
Yeah, I was going to say 16th would be President's Day weekend, although.
It would be?
Yeah, well, President's Day is the 20th.
Okay. So it'd be the Thursday before a 3-day weekend.
So we're doing the 23rd then? 23rd would work better.
Okay.
Okay, the 23rd? 23rd, yep, February 23rd.
And then why don't we have that be our discussion about post-secondary and transition? So then we have our April meeting, which, Glenna, if you're planning on incorporating the early intervening and everything throughout, I'm just trying to decide what topic.
You could add it to that fourth one and just make sure we've hit it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we can also talk about early intervention. Okay. So April, are there days in April?
So April's a tough month. Not so much for me, but we start having a whole bunch of spring breaks.
Sure.
In April.
And Easter's the 16th.
Easter's the 16th. Okay.
So a lot of spring breaks the week before that and the week after that.
Well, would it be a better idea to move it into the first week of May? I know. Okay. Because then that way we still have space between instead of trying to bump it earlier, then we can sort of bump it a little bit later.
Yes. What do you guys think about May 18th?
I think that gets close to the end of the school year. I agree with you.
Yeah. I was going to say, my kids get out of school the next week.
What? We could do the 4th. Do you guys want to do May the 4th?
Yeah, I think that would be better.
I'm seeing a couple no's though. So what about the 11th? Does anyone know on the 11th?
They changed their names from the first.
They bounce around, but usually they have committees in the afternoon. So we just probably couldn't meet in this room. Yeah. Are you guys okay with May 11th then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll have that be the intervention and sort of preventative stuff. Okay.
Maggie?
Yes.
Right over here.
I'm like, someone's talking.
Can I also suggest to the chair that, I've been involved in this for several years, and I feel like sometimes the meetings are a little bit disconnected. So along with having that specified time on the agenda to talk about, that, I would also ask that we have a report out on any recommendations that we've given and the results of what those recommendations are. Because I feel like that's a piece where we haven't done well in the past. And we just move from one topic to the other without knowing what kind of a difference or what kind of changes were made or what was resolved. So
a standing agenda item on sort of past business, following up on, we talked about this is where it's at right now, and maybe revisiting that every single meeting. I think that's a great agenda item to include.
I would just like to add, though, I think that's great, but I think we need to look at multiple past business. Otherwise, You're going to follow it in 2 months, and
depending on timelines, right? 2 months a lot may not have happened. Right.
Sure.
So some way to look at all.
So yeah, so it'll just be sort of a past business agenda item, and we can say this is still pending. This is where this is at. So we can be sort of reflective in what we're doing as a panel and seeing that we actually are contributing and things are changing, recognizing that things don't change over a 2-month period. Okay. So, at least according to the agenda we have so far, we're like way ahead of time, which is awesome. So yeah, I'm moving on to that next thing. I know we're supposed to have an informal break in 15 minutes, but I'd be willing to just push on through. Okay, good. I'm glad everybody else is with me on this one. Okay, so the first thing on that agenda item is the approval of the minutes for our meeting back in April. So knowing that you have all read them from cover to cover during your lunch, or you can, I did actually read them. Sorry.
Well,
I have a motion. Nice. Good job. I didn't even have to remember Robert's rules. We have a motion from Mallory to accept.
Actually, I do. There needs to be. It says I was present, but I wasn't at the last meeting. Yeah. I wanted to be here, but I was on an interview committee and I couldn't clone myself. I tried to clone myself. Yeah.
But apparently your desire to be here put you on the minutes.
So that I don't know about any other changes, but I do know that needs to be changed.
Oh. Okay, so Janelle was not here, and Karen Conder's name was misspelled.
Any other changes? Go ahead, Janelle.
Kathy needs to be excused because she was at a conference, she said.
Yeah, I was at LRP, so
Okay. Okay, so Kathy needs to be on the excused list. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve these with the changes that have been listed. Well, I can't make the motion. So Mallory made the motion. Jan seconds the motion. All right, so those are approved. Oh, yes, all in favor? Aye, excellent. All opposed? All abstaining?
I realize you had already passed this, but can I have a clarification? Was Janelle excused or just not here?
She was not here.
Okay.
She was not here. She was...
Yeah, I can't remember if I emailed and said I wasn't. Yeah.
I'll go look at that, but
Because it was a last minute thing.
yeah, it may have been a last minute thing that you.
Yeah, I think I initially said I was going to be here.
I think you did too.
And then I was asked to be on the interview committee.
And that.
And so I can't remember.
Okay, so the next business is setting meeting dates, which has already been done, so we get to check that off. The last that is not on there, but absolutely has to be done, is we need to have a chair-elect. And I don't want it to be the 1, 2, 3, not it. Whoever, speaks last. So I will entertain people who are willing to, or I guess making motions for other people to, because that's how it happened with me getting to be chair. Was
Who's not here?
Yeah, that's happened.
Yeah, unfortunately, that does happen.
I have a nomination.
So there's a second.
Okay, so there's a nomination for Tanya to be chair-elect. Echo has seconded. Tanya, I know, well, that's why I'm saying, well, this is...
My problem is that some of the dates interfere with the Youth and Custody Coordinating Council, so I would have to make sure that one either changes, or I can't really be a chair-elect if I can't be here, probably. So
that you make an excellent point. Other suggestions?
How about Turley?
The only reason I would say no, there's kind of a conflict with me being a chair at all. I'm just being honest about that.
Fair enough. I was going to say, Echo, you're awfully willing to.
I've already sent an email asking if I need to supposed to be here. So I think I've expired my term.
Well, your name tag's still here, so I'm assuming you're supposed to be here.
Now he mentions the name. Now he's really good.
Oh.
Yeah, Mallory. Yeah,
Absolutely.
perfect.
So we have a motion for Mallory. A second for Mallory.
I'll motion for Mallory.
Mallory, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it was in my
Right. No, then you re-up. Trust me, this is my fourth year. They had to approve me before I could. Yeah. Exactly. You can do this. You can totally do this. Excellent. Congratulations.
Say all in favor.
Wait. Oh, I need to all in favor of Mallory taking over as chair-elect. All opposed? Excellent.
I just have a question.
Okay.
I'm not a voting member. That's why I didn't vote for Mallory.
It's nothing personal.
She's not opposed either. So we do not have any students with disabilities. And a member of this panel has brought forth a possible nomination for a student member. But we usually do our nominations in the last meeting.
Sure.
And so I would just like to bring up that there is that possibility, and I don't know if you want to open the nominations to look for any particular positions before our next meeting or not.
I would be fine with that. I think that that's a voice that absolutely has to be on the panel.
We had it in the past, and it was good.
Yes.
We didn't get any additional nominations. There didn't seem to be an interest, and since it wasn't a requirement, we kind of let it go. But we did have it. We were proactive for several years.
No, I think that's definitely something we need to do. So do we have a name of someone who?
Yes, we do. So we have not received an official nomination, but Jennifer Howell's daughter.
Yeah, when John mentioned having students, I'll turn on the microphone. When John mentioned having students serve as a member of the panel, and I'm new, so I don't know, like procedurally, I sent an email to Glenna and said, hey, this is something that my daughter Nicole might be interested in. She's 15 years old, and she attends Salt Lake School for the Performing Arts. She'll be starting her sophomore year in high school next year, and so it would be a really great opportunity for her as she's learning self-advocacy skills, and would go well with some leadership development things that she's been doing as part of her school. I think she would be a great voice. She's often brave to speak up in times when other people, me included, are not always brave, including that at a school dance, she went up to the entire cluster of boys and said, which one of you wants to dance with me first? So that's pretty brave, right? That's my best example of her bravery. But
Would attending meetings be a burden to her given her age and school and everything?
Right. I do think that we'd have to arrange with her school to talk about why her absences, why she would have absences. But since there are a few meetings throughout the year, like it's less frequent than an orthodontist, so she's already done with that
and
part.
we would hope less painful.
And hopefully less painful.
Glenna, is there
a nomination to come in and then you guys to make a recommendation to the board, or would you like to consider this as the nomination, and then we could send it to the board and have her, if they approve it, have her in place at the next meeting?
I would prefer that, yeah, instead of having to send everything out. So Robert's rules. Entertain a motion to have this individual sent forth to the superintendent for approval. Do I have a motion? Have a motion from Karen. Excellent. Do I have a second?
Her name is Nicole Howell.
Nicole Howell.
Double seconds.
I was going to say Echo and Carol both. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Excellent. I even remembered it that time. Yay me. Okay. Is there any other business that needs to be addressed?
I just have another question. What are the qualifications for a student with disabilities to be a member of the panel?
Up to age 26.
Okay, so it could be, for example, a child who was in custody and qualified for special ed, and we have a youth advisory panel that we could tap into for a member of the youth advisory panel to come here.
I think we would love
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll work on getting a nomination from that.
Excellent.
I'll send you the
Aho, if we can accomplish that before the first meeting, we could take care of it at one time rather than sending 2 different times to the superintendent to appoint.
Sure.
So if we can get that accomplished via emails, maybe? Is that a possibility? Is everybody okay with that?
Sure. Okay. Glenna, do you have anything else that needs to go? Nice productive meeting, people. Seriously, this is awesome. So, as it looks like there is no other information that needs to be covered, our next meeting, which I wrote down and now I can't find my paper that had all my meetings listed on it, is in October. So we've got a nice long time to think about all these things. 22nd? 27th.
27th.
Thank you. Yes, there's my sheet now. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes. Also, if you have, this sheet needs to go to Rebecca with changes to your information. Did we? Any information at all, or changes too?
Just changes.
Why don't you give me your information?
Okay.
I did not put it in your packets because I knew it was going to be all over the place this time. And this will give me an opportunity to be able to get that in place for whoever the new person is that's going to replace me. So.
Okay, so if you could make sure that you do that. If that's everything, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Charity motions to adjourn. Who seconds? All in favor? All opposed? Excellent. I feel like I need a gavel now. Excellent. Thank you. I will see you in October.